Hello and welcome to the Thursday, the 18th of September, David 67 Celtic YouTube channel live stream. Hopefully a few people will join us as we go through. Comment section, as always, open for free and equal debate and discussion of opinions and thoughts and things in the Celtic world. Been a wee bit of a quiet week for Celtic so far this week. Not an awful lot of news coming out of Celtic. Great. Welcome to you as well, Paul McGuire, another long-term Celtic David 67 channel subscriber, regular contributor through the comment section as well, and nice positive comments and supportive comments for the last couple of years. So always welcome to get Anthony Flynn. Great. Hi to you as well. Nice to have a few Celtic fans and different voices on the channel. As I said in the wee promo thing for today's live stream, quite a number of topics we might want to talk about. A few of them I've done a wee bit of preparation for. Hello to Anton Rogan's left foot. Anton Rogan, good servant of Celtic quite a number of years ago. Had the misfortune of unfortunately missing a penalty kick in a cup final for Celtic, which was said to have affected his career to an extent, although I would never blame anybody who comes up to have the guts to take a penalty kick in a penalty kick shootout, especially when it was so deep into the score. I think it ended up 9-8 with Brian Irvine, the Aberdeen player who went on to have multiple sclerosis, scoring what turned out to be the winning penalty a long, long time ago in the good old days of Celtic. Good, and welcome to Pope Leo XIV. Hopefully Pope Leo XIV's got a wee bit of time to spend with us this evening prior to his much more important worldwide global matters. So, interesting news. So things I thought we might want to talk about today: the Partick Thistle game on Sunday. What kind of lineup that Brendan Rodgers is going to put out? Will it be a sort of a 50-50, some starters and some backups? Try and give a few of the backup players like Shin Yamada, Paolo Bernardo, Arnie Engels, as it is now, a backup. Will he give Kelechi Iheanacho a start? Will he have Kelechi Iheanacho again on the bench? There's quite a lot of different options for Brendan Rodgers. So other things that I also noticed in the last day or two of Celtic news, Brendan Rodgers seems to be supposedly looking to try and get Raheem Sterling in on loan in the January transfer window. Not sure whether people think that signing Raheem Sterling on loan in January is a move that you'd like to see. I have my doubts about whether Raheem Sterling would ever want to come to Celtic for a loan period. He certainly is currently frozen out by Chelsea. He's apparently training with another first team squad player, but he's training with the academy players. He's completely frozen out of the Chelsea first team squad, so he's not going to be playing any games, it would appear, between now and January, although it is said that Brendan Rodgers and the backroom people are trying to make a move for Raheem Sterling in the transfer window in Yes, they're Paul McEwen. I have similar thoughts to yourself that Raheem Sterling's days are maybe in the past. I have got a wee slide about Raheem Sterling's current stats in terms of his whole career, but also his most recent career. Does suggest maybe that that we're both quite right that Sterling's days are in the past. Yes, we'll come to Sebastian Chiniecki in a wee minute or two, but certainly Chiniecki I thought had an absolutely brilliant debut. Yes, so Pope Leo XIV was putting forward that if we did sign Raheem Sterling in the January transfer window, as supposedly Brendan Rodgers is lining up to do, along with Paul Tidsdale and the finance people, it would be perfect timing, in theory, for the last day of the Europa League. Celtic's first game in Europa League, of course, is next Wednesday. They're splitting the first week of the Europa League over 2 nights, same way that they're splitting the Champions League first 3 nights, first split of fixtures over 3 nights. At the moment, our conquerors in the last round, Kairat Almaty, are just 1-0 down to Sporting Lisbon in their first game. So does suggest that Kairat Almaty can be a very difficult team to break down, as we found out, and as Sporting Lisbon are finding out. So just coming back to that wee thing about Raheem Sterling's stats. So just take that a bit off. Right, so Raheem Sterling, sorry for a wee bit of bad organisation there. So Raheem Sterling, Chelsea player, currently £325,000 a week. So quite how Celtic fit £325,000 a week into their wage budget, goodness only knows. Ordinarily with a loan, you pay a loan fee, or you pay a loan fee plus a share of the person's weekly wages, or you pay just a share of the weekly wages. So there's different packages. I can't see in any way that Celtic can afford anything more than maybe a tenth of Raheem Sterling's £325,000 a week. If we paid any more than that, he would be way the biggest paid player at Celtic by far. So he does have an impressive career, 82 England caps, 20 goals. His full career stretching back through Liverpool, Chelsea, Man City, and a loan spell at Arsenal. 599 games, 182 goals, 134 assists. So pretty decent number of goals and assists for a wide player. Nearly 1 goal every 3 games, nearly 1 assist every 4 games or so, which is really impressive over his whole career. Good long career at Man City, good career at Liverpool. However, quite a bit of a disappointing career at Chelsea, which is going down and down. His career at Chelsea in last 2 seasons ago, 23-24, 43 games, 10 goals, 11 assists, so pretty decent there. Then he got loaned out to Arsenal last season, 28 games for Arsenal on loan, 1 goal and 5 assists. No games, no goals, no assists so far for Chelsea this season. And because he's been frozen out of the Chelsea first team squad, he won't have any games, meaningful games between now and January. So I have my doubts as to whether signing Raheem Sterling is going to be a goer. Interestingly, I was reading a wee thing from the English Professional Footballers Association. They are suggesting to Chelsea that freezing Raheem Sterling out of the first team squad, making him train with the academy players, is a potential breach of contract, which would then potentially allow Raheem Sterling to tear up his contract with Chelsea, which would make him a free agent, which of course would then allow him to join Celtic or anybody straight away. But either way, I can't really see Raheem Sterling coming to Celtic, and I think probably if we were to put the Raheem Sterling coming to Celtic to a poll on the channel or to Celtic fans in general, I think probably it would be a no from all of us. For one thing, I also don't really see Raheem Sterling wanting to come to Celtic. Supposedly, he still has a dream of getting into England's World Cup squad for 2026. Given the way that most international managers concern playing in Scotland, I'm not sure that Raheem Sterling would want to come to Celtic. Can't see him taking the massive drop in wages to come to Celtic either. And as a few of you have been saying in the comment section, he probably is a player that is past his best, especially given the fact that he's unlikely to be playing any proper football between now and January the 1st. So I have my doubts that it's actually really a goer, and I think it's yet another of these stories made up by supposed Celtic insiders and Brendan Rodgers insiders regarding potential signings at Celtic. Well, it'd be interesting. That's a perfectly valid point, Anton Rogan's left foot, that maybe the money isn't the thing for Raheem Sterling. Maybe he does want to play football. Maybe he's a wee bit similar to Kieran Tierney. Kieran Tierney reportedly on something like £110,000 a week, £120,000 a week at Arsenal. Reportedly did have offers from several English Premier League sides to go to them this summer onwards. Everton were one team named who were certainly looking to match his wage demands. The thought is Tierney's dropped to about £40,000 a week at Celtic, which of course is well over £2 million a year, making him the second highest paid Celtic employee behind Brendan Rodgers, who's on over £3 million a year. Not sure we're getting £3 million worth of a year out of Brendan Rodgers as the manager, however. So it may be that Raheem Sterling is one of the few footballers in the world for whom money doesn't matter. Certainly, I would have thought with his long career, Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea, if he's on £325,000 a year, that's going to be a heck of a lot of money per year he's getting from Chelsea. He's got 2 years left on his Chelsea contract. So he could just sit in the stands watching his teammates winning games and winning points and winning trophies, or he could choose to leave the club. Nobody seemed to come in for him in the summer transfer window, which I thought was a bit surprising. It may be that his wage demands were too much. Yeah, so maybe as Paul McEwen's saying, maybe Raheem Sterling as a multi-millionaire, maybe the money doesn't matter to him. He has apparently got involved in a few different sort of charity things and scholarships and bursaries and stuff to try and help young footballers and school kids coming from his where he was brought up in the London area initially. So maybe money isn't an option for Raheem Sterling. So maybe he would come. If he did come to Celtic, I suspect that Brendan Rodgers would probably play him week in, week out. Yes, Sad Sligo boy. I think that's a really very good point. And I was actually going to say, I was wondering what the role was for players like. What role do the players like Yamada, Paulo Bernardo, Inamura, Jamai, Simpson, Puzzi, Osman, Kenny all have between now and Christmas? So it's going to be having games every couple of weeks in the Europa League. We're going to be having League Cup matches stretching through the rest of the year. We're going to have league fixtures, obviously, mostly on Sundays, some on Saturdays. It is quite hard to see where players like Yamada, Inamura, JSP, Osmond are going to play, because none of them are in the Europa League squad. Paulo Bernardo is, Kenny is, but the others aren't. So they could well just be sitting on the sidelines twiddling their thumbs for the rest of this year. I think personally it's quite important to get quite a lot of those players back into regular games. Otherwise, their careers are just going to go stagnant. But I 100% agree that this should be a time where, as was the case, it seemed much more under the Ange Postecoglou 2 years as Celtic manager, where the Postecoglou put players up for scouting. The scouting people brought players for Postecoglou to watch via videos and film, etc. He then sent the scouts out to see these players. He worked with the recruitment team, who, of course, are many of the people in the previous recruitment team got forced out when Rodgers took over for one reason or another. So it certainly appeared under Ange Postecoglou that players were scouted quicker, recruited quicker, and that a lot of the negotiations to bring a player in were done a lot quicker. In that, if you remember, Ideguchi, Maeda, and Hatate all came in right at the start of 2022. Alison Johnson came in right at the start of 2023. They signed on the first day of the transfer window. Alison Johnson was straight into the Celtic squad for the Rangers match on the 4th of January. So it certainly seemed under the previous regime, Ange Postecoglou, with some different scouts and some different people in the recruiting team, it seemed like they could coordinate everything with the finance people to get players in nice and early. And I think one of the lessons I think that the club should learn from the less than successful summer transfer window was, it does appear that all those different departments aren't working together properly. Supposedly, Brendan Rodgers greenlights any signing at Celtic, so it does apply that he's saying, yes, I want to sign Inamura, I want to sign JSP, I want to sign Yamada, etc., etc. So these are all players he supposedly wants to bring in. I think certainly planning for the future is always a good idea, but I think you also need to upgrade your squad. So I think entirely reasonable. Inamura and Osmond are players for the future, perfectly fine, but they need to be playing football to keep them in progressing. I think Yamada was, when he signed for us, he had just got his Japanese first cap. He'd been one of the highest rated players in the Japanese J League the 2 seasons before. And so I think Yamada has been rather unlucky to get sidelined and frozen out by Brendan Rodgers. It would be interesting to see whether Yamada does get a go on Sunday, because otherwise I doubt he's going to get terribly many games between now and January. One would expect probably in January Celtic would look to get theoretically a new first choice younger striker in to take the lead above Iheanacho, which then allows Dyson Maeda to play more as an out wide player. Obviously, Celtic also probably need to start planning for Dyson Maeda leaving the club, be it in the January window or what's rumoured to be more likely the case, the summer window. But I certainly agree with the comment there that what Celtic should be using this September, October period right through to January. Yep. So I think it's entirely reasonable for Celtic to aspire for the last 8 of Europa League, our big rivals across the city. They've done that a couple of times in recent years. They've managed to get to Europa League last 8. Remembering that was a Rangers team both times that we comfortably beat in the league. We very comfortably beat that Rangers team last year, but they managed to get deep into the Europa League. I think if Celtic have got their players playing to their best, I think we can get to the last 8. I think Celtic's ambitions in Europe, I think, have to be tempered a little bit. I think it's very, very difficult for anybody outside the big leagues to get far. Yes. So coming back to Clashman Numpty's point about Tuniecki, I was really impressed with Tuniecki's performance last Sunday. It is admittedly just one game. He showed all the kind of skills that Jota often showed up and down the wings. Good pace, step overs, trickery. He had several good passes into the box. He had a few shots, many of which didn't get very close to the goal. Did get a shot in the second half that went just the other side of the post. I would say I thought I thought the game against Livingston, Celtic played well. I think the game against Falkirk, Celtic played well. We struggled to break down St Mirren at the start of the season. There were some good spells in the Aberdeen match. We obviously had 2 pretty rotten games against Kairat Almaty, with a rotten game against Rangers. We played terribly. They played just as terribly. It was one of the worst games of football I've seen in 53 years as a Celtic supporter. But I would say, having watched all the games this season, I think Celtic have at times played good football. What really has been my biggest bugbear with the team is the midfield in particular isn't working. The combination of Negrin, Hattati and McGregor, they have so rarely ever gelled as a 3. And I think that's one. I'm not quite sure what the best combination of those 3 players is. I wonder also whether the best combination of those 3 is in the conventional way that Rodgers plays, with McGregor as that deeper one, and then Hattati and Negrin kind of side by side. I don't really know that that's the best combination. Brendan Rodgers doesn't tend to take many risks in terms of changing formations and changing roles. He likes staying in his 4-3-3. He likes having 2 wide players at central striker. He likes having a deeper midfielder and 2 midfielders ahead of him. We don't have much flexibility in our lineups. But I totally agree, green for goal. I think some of Celtic's performances this season have been very poor, primarily the Rangers and the 2 Kairat Almaty games. In those games, we showed absolutely no imagination. We had no imagination on the pitch. We had no imagination coming off the bench, and we had no imagination in changing tactics, which is partly McGregor's fault as the captain, not getting the players fired up, not changing things on the pitch. But primarily it's coming from Brendan Rodgers. Oh, that's sad. I say I was watched before I started the live stream. I was just keeping an eye on the Kairat Almaty game. Looks like they have gone 2-0 down now, but yes. This was my own thoughts for the Partick Thistle game at the weekend. Sinisalo, who was in goal the last time, Donovan, because we don't have any other fit right backs, but I thought Donovan was one of Celtic's better players. At the weekend, the game, we managed to sneak through a 2-1 win with a what I thought was, having watched the Willie Collum refereeing VAR show on the Friday evening on Sky Sports at 6:30, it looked like the almost carbon copy of one of the ones that Willie Collum was saying had to be a penalty. So I thought, as soon as I saw it on the replay, I thought this is going to be a penalty kick. And I do find it quite surprising. All these ex-referees don't seem to be up to date with the way that Willie Collum and UEFA and FIFA are interpreting the handball rule, because a lot of the things about, it's coming from close distance, it was deflected, all these things apparently under current FIFA, UEFA and Scottish refereeing guidelines are supposed to be taken into consideration, but they don't negate it being a penalty kick if it's thought that the player moves his arm to the ball, or that it's blocking a goal-bound shot, or all these things. So these are one of my thoughts. Anyway, so I thought Donovan had a great game. So I think Donovan, for me, as soon as Alistair Johnston comes back, rises to number 2, the right back at Celtic. I suspect Rodgers will drop Donovan back down to watching from the stands and put Ralston back in as number 2 right back behind Johnson. Johnson hopefully coming back a few weeks earlier, so hopefully coming back towards the end of September, early October, rather than the end of October. But we'll see how that happens. So Dane Murray and Scales as central defenders, Sirachi at left back. I personally would give Callum McGregor a rest, get himself fired up. So with Engels or Paolo Bernardo as the more withdrawn number 6 midfielder, Negrin or Engels as the right-sided midfielder, assuming Paolo Bernardo instead is the defensive midfielders, McCowan on the left. I think Balakwisha, Iheanacho and Tinyetki is the front 3, although personally I would, given the fact that Iheanacho was not properly match fit yet, I would go for Yamada, who's come from a full season or 3/4 of a season in Japan, and I think he's shown good signs of being a good player for Celtic in his brief subs appearances, particularly when he started against Livingston. I think he was very close to getting a few goals in that game. And certainly, as Pope Leo XIV saying that is partly that is a mixture of players who probably are first choice starters, and several players who theoretically are more of the backup players like Donovan, Murray, Sirachi, Engels, Paolo Bernardo, the Iheanacho or Yamada are definitely the backup strikers. It appears Brendan Rodgers' preference is to go for Dyson Maida as being our main striker up until January. I think there's absolutely nobody. I think the performances against Keira Amati were very, 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 very disappointing. The squad of players we had for those games was more than good enough to have beaten Keira Amati home and away. As I said, I thought our tactics, our formation were boring. They played right into the way that Keira Amati played the whole of their other qualifying games. They took on Slovan Bratislava. They played exactly the same against Slovan Bratislava as they did against Celtic. We didn't seem to have any new variations of tactics, formations, players between the first leg and the second leg. We didn't do anything really to change anything during the second leg. And for me, that all is down to Rodgers, the coaching staff, and the players. The players could have done something to change their stars. Yes, so everybody, I'm as anybody who knows me from doing this channel for 2 years, doing my replies in the comment sections and my videos in general, I always am a super optimistic person in terms of supporting Celtic. The reason I have that optimism is, like probably quite a lot of you, I've been supporting Celtic since 1971, 72, so from about the age of 4 or 5, so that's 53 years. And so supported Celtic through the miserable years of the 80s and 90s. And so being a Celtic supporter in those days, when Aberdeen, Dundee United, Rangers were better than us, winning things, and we were hardly winning anything, it's great to be a Celtic supporter, in my view, the last 25 years. Particularly the last 15 years, 14 titles out of 15 years, doubles and trebles practically every single year for those 15 years. One season we've not won the league in the last 15. Those are all things about how brilliant Celtic is. And so I would think the players we've got are more than good enough to win domestically a double or a treble again this season. The squad has depth in it. It did need to be improved more in the summer window, particularly to take on Champions League. However, the players we played against, Kirat Almaty home and away, were more than good enough to beat them. Just they didn't play up to their standards. Kirat Almaty played out their skins. They played much better as a team than we did. And our backroom people, Rodgers, Strachan, Kennedy, etc., didn't do their job. I don't think we got £3 million worth out of Brendan Rodgers in those two games against Kirat Almaty. Sligo Boy, you make a perfectly reasonable point. It depends on who you believe. It depends on who you believe. There are contrasting stories coming out of Celtic and all these supposed Celtic insiders, particularly the ones who write for the Daily Record, write for the Glasgow Herald, and talk on their own podcasts or talk on Go Radio. All of them seem to have all these inside sources at Celtic, a lot of which seems to be just made up of rumour and supposition and half-truths. One of the stories where there were a few players that Celtic were intending to sign, but those players wouldn't come to Celtic until Celtic were in the Champions League, which of course we weren't. And so those players said, we will sign for you, but you have to be in the Champions League. Remembering in previous years, we were straight into the Champions League, which did mean recruiting players was easier in the last 2 or 3 years when we've been straight into the Champions League. And so there were a few players who decided not to come to Celtic because we weren't in the Champions League. Now, that might be probably Celtic should have separated those ones out and gone for players who wanted to come to Celtic. Balikwisha and Chinyetki were very committed to coming to Celtic, whether we were in the Champions League or not in the Champions League. They both signed for us, unfortunately, just after we got knocked out the Champions League, but both of them were more than willing to come to the club, whether we were in or not in the Champions League. And I think that's, again, another lesson that the scouting team and the recruiting team should do, is work out which players actually want to come and play for Celtic and which players only want to come and play for Celtic if they are in the Champions League or etc. And I think that wasn't something that was well done by whomever job it was to work that out. I'm so if anyone thinks I'm belittling the hard work of all the Celtic players, Celtic managers in the 80s and 90s, that is by far not what I'm doing. What I'm saying is, Celtic tried their hardest. The manager did a great job, but in those years, Celtic were coming second, third, occasionally fourth. We weren't winning trophies. We weren't winning anything. But that does not belittle the hard work and the dedication of all the players, all the coaching staff. Tommy Burns, one of Celtic's all-time greats. I think he was managing with one arm tied behind his back. He was up against two of the best managers in the history of Scottish football, Jim McLean and Alex Ferguson. He was up against Rangers, breaking all the financial rules to get all the best players. And he was also operating in a Celtic team who was financially abysmally managed off the pitch, which is why we nearly went bankrupt in 1994. And so Tommy Burns had a really, really hard job to put a good quality team on the pitch. It just so happened that Aberdeen, Dun United, had better players, better manager, and Rangers were breaking all the financial rules and had some of the really very good players playing for them then. Yes, and Pope Leo XIV, I think it's a really good point. We shouldn't linger in the past. I think we do need to keep on looking to the future, and I do personally think the people in charge of the finances of the club, they have got ambition to keep on moving Celtic forward, because if they keep on moving Celtic forward, that makes the club richer and richer and richer, which helps their stock prices, their share prices, helps their dividends, etc. So it's very much in the interest of the boards to keep on spending money, to keep on progressing. But I think there was a number of different things within the background. Yes, it does appear, unfortunately, after me starting off by saying how well Keirat Almaty were doing against Sporting Club of Portugal, they've had a less good second half. And of course, during the pre-season, we did beat Sporting Club in one of the pre-season friendlies on our Portuguese leg of the tour. So, well, the only reason the channel is called David 67 is that's when I was born. So if I was born in 68 or 65 or 66, I was born in 67. I was born a few months after the Lisbon Lions won the European Cup for Celtic. So that's why I'm called David. That's why it's called David 67. That's the only reason. It just seemed like a reasonable name to give the channel. I can't. Well, no, it's okay. No, I think I completely get your point, though. That sometimes we do live in the past, and I do 1,000% agree. We need to keep on moving forward. We need to keep on moving Celtic forward. Interesting, or possibly interesting, comment that Peter Grant was doing on Go Radio, which was about Celtic not expanding and renewing the stand, and for as long as Scotland were in the Scottish Premier Football League, which does suggest that the rumours about there being some form of pan-European Super League where clubs from all around Europe compete in one league, or one league with 2 or 3 different divisions. Maybe that's a goer. Of course, about 20 years ago was all these rumours about Celtic joining the English Premier League, English Premiership. I got put in the back burner. I can't see that ever happening. If Rangers and Celtic, etc., were to join the English League, they would have to join right at the very, very bottom in the non-league area and move up and up and up. So, but there are a lot of stories suggesting that the European Club Association, which of course Peter Lawwell is highly involved in as one of the leaders in that group, working with UEFA, there are moves supposedly for a European Super League in the longer term. Again, Kenneth Todd, there are an awful lot of stories and rumours coming out of Celtic that Lawwell and Rodgers don't get on. When Lawwell was the chief executive officer, he would have worked with the managers on a very, very regular, almost day-to-day basis, same way that Nicholson and the chief financial officer work pretty much on a daily basis with Rodgers. Lawwell is now the chairman, so the chairman works as the chairperson of the board, so they don't actually have very much contact with the playing staff, the recruitment staff, etc. It's more the jobs of the heads of those departments liaising with Nicholson and the chief financial officer, liaising with Rodgers, and then the CFO and the CEO taking things to Lawwell and the other members of the board. Lawwell is a non-executive, thus he doesn't have an actual executive job on the board. His job is to coordinate the board and run the board side of things, not actually get involved with the play. So in theory, there shouldn't really be any reason for Lawwell and Rodgers to have much contact, because the contact with Lawwell should be coming through the CFO and the CEO. So primarily Michael Nicholson. So I do think a lot of these things are possibly a red herring. And it does always, when I read these stories on the Celtic sites, the sports sites, etc., it does so often think, I don't think these people actually know what they're talking about, because there was a Go Radio person, Mark Gaetti or something like that, a lot of what he said was this is probably the case, and this is probably the case, or I have heard. Well, I think we've all heard things, but anyway. So again, yep. No. So yes, I personally wish that leaks coming out of Celtic didn't come out of Celtic, and that things that are supposed to be done behind closed doors are done behind closed doors. I am 100% certain if Rodgers and Lawwell and have a beef, that people like Dermot Desmond and Nicholson will be involved to iron that out. But I don't actually think that that Lawwell and Rodgers have an awful lot of contact on a regular basis, because the chain of command isn't really from Rodgers to Lawwell. It does appear that Lawwell and Rodgers and Nicholson and Dermot Desmond often get together socially to play golf or etc. But I don't think there's actually a real working relationship between them. Yes. So, as I said, there have been these rumours about the European Super League for maybe about 10 years. It looked like it was getting off the ground, and then UEFA blocked it completely. And then that led to an expanded Champions League format, which seemed to pacify the Liverpools, the Barcelonas, the Real Madrids, the PSGs, the Italian clubs, etc. But it's all kind of worked through the courts, and it does look like the European Club Association, which is about 700 European clubs who are part of a cooperative type of thing, a group that negotiates and talks to each other and liaises with each other. It does look like they are working with the Champions League, UEFA people. Now, the change to the Champions League last season, which went to this league format, and the change of the way that you qualify and the 8-game format and the last 24, etc. That all apparently were things that UEFA was getting through negotiation with the European Club Association. So there are moves supposedly for apparently for there to be a big pan-European league, and that there are moves with all the big European clubs, of which Celtic and Rangers are considered big European clubs, of having some format where Celtic and Rangers, rather than playing week in, week out against Aberdeen and Dundee United and Dundee and Hearts and Hibs, their games on a week-to-week basis will be against Ajax and Feyenoord and PSV and Atalanta and so on. And that there's a sort of promotion relegation thing where teams can move up and down the divisions and stuff. But that's still a number of years off. Well, it's an interesting point to make, Sligo Boy. I am not a lawyer. I have had discussions with lawyers, particularly financial lawyers, and there are restrictions as to what you can say, given the fact that you are a public limited company and you're on the stock exchange as a team, as a club, an organization, whatever you want to call it, with stocks and shares. So there are actually restrictions about what information you can put out into the public before it's a done deal. So if two big companies were, let's say, Coca-Cola and Pepsi, just for two examples, were going to merge to be one company, they're not supposed to share all the inner workings of that until it's a done deal, and then they take that to the stock market, the shares market, and then release it. So negotiating player transfers is supposed to be done behind closed doors. It's not supposed to be done in the open, because it potentially leads to insider trading, in that some people would know that a deal is about to go through, then they buy shares in that club because they know that club's shares are going to go up and up. So there are a lot of sensitive things that aren't supposed to be shared in public. And I think that was part of what the board was trying to say, is they try and do all their transfers behind closed doors in secret because of all the rules on financial laws and employment laws and all kinds of other things that they have to do. But I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know that for definite. But that's some guidance I got given from lawyer contacts, lawyer friends. So the theory as to why Scotland, a Scottish team, couldn't move to England is that they're separate football associations. So one of the theories has always been if Celtic and Rangers move to the English Premier League or move to the English league system, potentially that mean that Scotland wouldn't get to have a national side anymore, that Scotland's national side would be part of England's national side. And that was also one of the worries about having a British team in the Olympics football, was the fact that England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland have 4 separate FAs, and that by having one combined team, that might affect the independence of the 4 different national federations. The other thing, of course, is that the English league teams don't want Celtic and Rangers in because it blocks them getting into the English Premier League, or it takes the place of 2 teams already in the English Premier League. Okay, sorry, I apologize. It's difficult with comments to quite know where someone's coming from. So that was my thought. I'm sorry if I've misconstrued what you were saying. I apologize. It's difficult. I'm a complete amateur at doing live streams. I am just an enthusiastic, late middle-aged man who's having some fun, and it's so nice that so many people participate and give their comments. Jezebel, yep. Yes, so there have been stories throughout the last 2 or 3 months that Rodgers and his agent have been angling and looking at potential moves for the summer of 2026. About 4-6 weeks ago, there were a couple of 2-3 stories saying that Rodgers was planning his next move to be into international football, looking at the summer of 2026 with the FIFA World Cup as being a chance for him to move into international football. Number of also people saying that Rodgers' next plan is to move to Saudi football, a bit like Steven Gerrard did. A few other British managers and managers who've worked in Britain have done. So I think whoever this insider was that leaked the story to The Sun, and of course The Sun knows who it is, which I thought was a bit funny. In the press conference, one of the Sun journalists who knows who the insider is, or who the supposed insider is, actually knows who it was. And then they're asking Brendan Rodgers, is he going to be part of the leak inquiry in? And does he know who the person is? Well, the journalist who asked the questions, he knows who the person is, because he and his editor are the ones who wrote the story about the supposed insiders. I did think it was quite entertaining. Russell Martin taking the Rangers squad off to Loch Lomond for a team bonding exercise. Those kind of things can often go and unfortunately badly wrong with team bonding exercises, especially if there's any alcohol involved. So my personal feeling is that Rodgers, quite rightly, he's got a contract with Celtic just for 3 years. A lot of people have had doubts that he wanted to stay at Celtic any longer than 3 years, no matter what the contract options were. So it's entirely reasonable for him to be looking to move on to somebody else. I think it's also entirely reasonable for Celtic to give him an offer. Celtic gave Ange Postecoglou several offers. Ange Postecoglou chose to leave Celtic at the end of his second year. Yes. So one of the problems that Celtic's got is a very small in terms of European leagues. Celtic have got a very small European yearly TV money from the contract we've got with Sky Sport, Scottish Football's got with Sky Sports and Premier Sports, and a wee bit of money from BBC for highlights and stuff. So our TV money is dwarfed by many of the European leagues. We're something like 20th in the world for TV money. The Scottish TV money package is less than the American Women's League, so we're actually below them in the league in terms of monetary yearly money. Up until just recently, Scotland's TV money was actually below India's TV money and South Africa's TV money for their leagues. So it shows how low Scotland's TV money is in global terms. Now, we have moved up a few ranks with Premier Sports adding another 10 million into the pot. But Celtic have a small TV money if we're not in the Champions League. We have a small TV pot. We have a relatively small sponsorship money because we're playing in the Scottish Premier League. Thus, teams, the people who want to sponsor us, they don't get as much exposure as they would be if they're sponsoring Brentford or one of the smaller teams in the English Premier League, because they're on global television, high prestige television all the time. Yes. So Celtic's problem is we're a gigantic big fish in a small pond. When we moved into the Champions League, we were a smallish fish in a super big pond. One of the theories as to how Celtic and, to a less extent, Rangers can punch to their actual weight in terms of being a global team like we are, that we've got a global exposure in terms of fans. We've got fans in all countries of the world because of the fact that Scottish people and Irish people were so keen to leave their countries and go to new countries. So we've got millions of supporters all over the world. We've got supporters in the Far East, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America, South America, all over Europe and stuff. So we have got a global brand, but unfortunately, being in Scotland, we are very, very restricted as to how much we can exploit that global brand to be the size of club that we deserve to be. So one theory would be, if they do get this European league off the ground, where rather than playing Scottish teams every week, we'll be playing other European teams every week. So it'll be like our league. But the prize money that Celtic get for winning the Scottish Premiership every year is small compared to what you get for coming 17th out of 20 in the English Premier League, which is where Spurs were last year. They got straight into the Champions League because they won the Europa League, and they got tens of millions for coming one above the relegation zone. We got nowhere near that much money for winning the league. So unfortunately, our league can't attract big big TV money, and our league can't attract big sponsorship money, so prize money is going to be very small. So it does cut down on what Celtic can make in terms of revenue through winning things, or through sponsorship or TV, etc. Being in the Champions League, that did move Celtic up a few rungs, but unfortunately that's not going to be the case. Yes, so you're entirely right. There was the fiasco of Sky put a pretty decent bid on the table. Then Setanta Sport put a bigger bid on the table. That all fell apart. That also caused major problems in the English Championship and the English lower divisions. Sky bailed out the English Championships and the English lower divisions, but they didn't bail out the Scottish Premier. It's called the Scottish footballing system. And then Sky came back with actually a very low bid in terms of what they would bid for the Scottish contract, knowing that there was nobody else at that time who could offer anything like the money. BBC couldn't offer the money, STV, there weren't any other broadcasters at the time, and Setanta had gone completely out of business. So just a wee interesting thing in terms of where Celtic's ambitions should actually be in terms of Europe. It's the overwhelming thing that I hear all the time from the Celtic fans who are leading all the protest groups is they want Celtic to keep on progressing in Europe. The question is how far can Celtic actually progress in Europe, given the fact that we are in a low TV money league, a low prize money league, a low sponsorship league, and a league that's probably in the third division in terms of European sorts of leagues, behind the big five of England, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. You've then got the next rank, which is the Belgiums, the Hollands, the Portugals, the Turkeys, etc., who are all in the next band in terms of both prestige and in terms of TV money. And then we're kind of down in the third division alongside the Scandinavian leagues and the smaller, some of the smaller Central European leagues. We haven't got the money that other countries do in terms of all the things associated with the league. So what I thought would be interesting, and I found it interesting, was to have a wee look to see in terms of teams outside the big five winning the Champions League or European Cup. So in the last time anybody outside the big five of England, Germany, Italy, France, or Spain that won the Champions League was way back in 2003-04 when Porto won it in 2004, having beaten us the previous year in the UEFA Cup. So it's been over 20 years since anybody outside the big lot, the big five, has won. There's only ever been 2 non-big five winners in the last 30 years. So Porto in 2004 won Champions League. Ajax won the old-fashioned European Cup in '95. There's only been 3 non-big five finalists in those 30-plus years. Ajax did it twice, Porto done it once. And only 2 since 2004, so i.e. the year that Porto won, there's only been 2 non-big five semi-finalists, both of which were Dutch. So it kind of shows that the Dutch league in terms of money, prestige, sponsorship, prize money, etc., is a second league, a second tier team behind the big five. And if we go have a wee look at this one, it shows that if you're, again, in terms of getting to the last 16 or the last 8, there's a tiny number of teams outside the big five who actually got into the last 16 in the last 10 years. So 27 times there's been non-big top 5 have got into the last 16 in the last 10 years. And of those, 27 times only 6 are tier 3 nations like Scotland. So Basel did it, Copenhagen did it. A couple of times Ukrainian teams have done it. So it's very rare that any team outside of the Big Five gets any big success in the Champions League. So Celtic is playing with one leg tied behind its back, effectively. Yes, I Clashman Numpty, I agree 1,000%. I agree that we should keep on trying to progress in Europe, keep on trying to at least achieve what we achieved last year, and try and go one step further. I do not. The transfer window that we've just had could have and should have been better. I think there's a lot of different reasons why it should have gone better or could have gone better. My personal feeling is blaming the board 100% is not fair. I think there's a lot of different factors. One could argue that the CEO, Michael Nicholson, the chief financial officer, because they are in charge of they're kind of they're in charge of a lot of the different departments. A lot of people that's their point of contact. That's their sort of manager type of thing. So in essence, those two should be running the financial side, the recruitment side, the scouting side, all the contracts, all the public relations, and all the human resources stuff far better. So they're not doing their job. Or it could be people beneath them are not doing their job, but it's their job to make those people better or to get rid of them and replace them with other people. I completely agree. We should be as ambitious as we can be, and we should balance out player salaries, transfer fees, agent fees, all these different things. Our wage budget, as I tried to demonstrate last week's podcast live stream, our wage budget has went up from 22-23 to 23-24 to 24-25. It's going to go up even more in 25 to 26, i.e. next financial year, because you're always 1 year behind in terms of your financial reports. But our wage budget has gone up quite considerably in the last couple of years. It's going to go up even more with us adding Jota and Tierney, because they're both big high earners. Quite a lot of folk are saying that people like Maeda and Carter-Vickers and McGregor, who are already the highest earners at Celtic before Jota and Tierney came to the club, there are a lot of sources saying that their contracts go up and up in response to other club teams, other people joining the club. So our wage budget has gone up quite considerably 2 years ago, last year, and it will be going up a lot more again this year. So all these things have to be considered. And also this year we'll have considerably less revenue from the European competitions. So there'll be less money in the pot, but also this commitment to pay our top paid players even more. And one of the ways the club's been using its money is to try and give players like Carter-Vickers, McGregor, Maeda, Hatate, etc., nice long-term contracts. Whether giving players a 4 or 5 year contract's a good idea until they've actually really started to play well for Celtic is another matter, because quite a few of the players like Luis Palmer, Lakabielka, Mike Navrocki, Marco Tilio, several others were on 4 and 5 year contracts before they'd actually really demonstrated they were good enough to play for Celtic. So again, part of that's down to Michael Nicholson and the financial officer Mackay as well. Yes, so there will be financial figures being released quite soon. There are rumours that these numbers are going to be much higher than before. Quite how much openness the board and Michael Nicholson, etc., probably will be Nicholson and Lawwell will be the two who will be doing that report. How in public they are with all these things is another matter. They have a duty to all the shareholders, all the investors, to be open with all these things as well. I 100% agree. Back the team, back the manager. One could argue spending £40 million on players in last year's two transfer windows, the summer window of last summer, not this summer, but the one before, and last winter, the January 25 window, we spent £40 million on players. To me, that sounds like that's backing the manager, giving £40 million in new players, many of whom, of course, have not come through to be first-team starters. Engels, Trusty on the bench most of the time, assuming Trusty gets back fit. You most likely will be on the bench backing up Scales. Engels seems to be fourth or fifth choice midfielder now. Adam Ida bought last summer for £9 million. We've sold him this summer for £7 million. So to me, all these things were backing the manager. The players that came in, the 12 players that came in during the summer, were all apparently greenlit by Brendan Rodgers. So one way or another, Brendan Rodgers wanted those 12 players into the squad. Admittedly, apparently 2 or 3 were planned to be players to develop. Quite how Osmond and Inamura are going to develop, I don't know, because they're hardly going to be playing football for the next few weeks, few months rather. So dividends is one. So you're entirely right. Anton Rogan's left foot. Dividends is something that is all to do with stocks and shares and investors. Although for the dividends to maintain and for the club to remain a good financial investment, they also have to keep on progressing and keeping on doing well. Otherwise, if the club's not doing well financially but also on the pitch, the share price will go down and down. If the quality of players at the club isn't good, investors will lose faith in the club as a thing to invest in, and the share prices will go down and down because people will sell the shares off. So it's a balancing act of keeping the club going forward, keeping the club high quality, keeping the club winning, to keep the share price up and up and up, and to keep the dividends high, which keeps on bringing in new shareholders, new share prices, new investors, etc. So it is a balancing act, and I think we'll see that Sligo Boy, you make a good point, and one of the things also in terms of Celtic's wage budget is that Celtic's wage budget for the non-playing staff, i.e. the grounds people, the admin people, all the people who work for the club, that also went up quite considerably. So as well as rewarding the according to all the figures from what I can read, as well as rewarding the players and the coaching staff and giving Brendan Rodgers £3 million plus per year for 3 years, so the best part of £10 million over his 3-year contract, Celtic also increased their budget for their wages and their salaries, etc., for the groundsmen, the admin people, all the behind-the-scenes people. So Celtic did actually invest in those people. So they did actually increase the wages for everybody behind the scenes, as well as the people who are in the playing staff and the coaching staff. Yeah, so as I said, my small amount of financial knowledge is the dividends the dividends will keep stable or go up as long as Celtic is a successful team on the pitch and off the pitch. If Celtic's not a successful team on the pitch, it will not be as successful off the pitch, and it won't be a club that investors want to invest by buying shares and stuff. Nope. So it's saying Russell Martin's been sacked. Is that true? I didn't see any kind of rumours that would be the case, because just double check. So I haven't seen any confirmation as yet that Russell Martin has been signed. What I do know is that the main money man, the main financial people behind the San Francisco 49ers money group was coming in this weekend, apparently, for meetings with the people at Rangers and with Russell Martin after the Hibs game or before the Hibs game. So so it wouldn't be too surprising if Russell Martin did lose his job after the Hibs match, if he hasn't lost it already. But I haven't seen any confirmation as yet that Russell Martin has gone. Yeah. Yes. So Flashman Umpty, my personal feeling is that the squad that Brendan Rodgers had at the end of the transfer window, and the squad that he had taking into the two Kairat Almaty games, was more than good enough to beat Kairat Almaty over two legs. So it's him and the players and the coaches that let us down. I think the squad that he had at the end of the transfer window is more than good enough to get a double or treble in Scotland. I think it's good enough, if they play to their form, to get into the last eight of the Europa League. However, all of us wanted Celtic to be in the Champions League, trying to equal or better what we did the previous year. That's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons I'm a great believer in Celtic should go all out to do the best they possibly can in the Europa League. For one thing, the better we can do in the Europa League, the better it means Scotland's coefficient is in years to come. So this year wasn't great in terms of Scotland's. And the other thing with the coefficient, it's always a year or two. There's a bit of a lag between what the qualifying is in the season in the future. So Scotland, because Scotland's not been doing terribly well in the previous 2 or 3 seasons in Europe, our coefficient for next year's qualifiers will be even worse than it was this time. So it's likely we'll probably have 2 or 3 qualifying games to get through, assuming that we win the Scottish Premiership again this season, which I 1,000% believe we will do. We'll probably have 2 or 3 qualifiers to go through. So it's going to be even more difficult next season to qualify. Although possibly Brendan Rodgers will do a better job of getting all the players completely 100% fully fit for game one of the qualifiers. My feeling is that Celtic were a bit slow in getting players ready to play the first game of the season against St Mirren, and a bit slow in getting players ready to play the 2 very, very important games against Kairat Almaty. I think Celtic were a few weeks behind. Players like Reo Hatate and Dyson Maida were given an extra 2 or 3 weeks of holiday back home in Japan. Players like Carter Vickers, who had a wee bit of an operation during the summer, he was given extra time. Of all the players who were given a bit extra time, I think Alistair Johnson's the only one who deserved a bit of extra time, because he was involved with Canada right through the summer in terms of local North American, Central American tournaments. But a lot of Celtic players were actually quite slow and late to get back to full practice. Several of our players who've been involved in friendly internationals were given an extra couple of weeks. So the Liam Scales, the Johnny Kennys, the Adam Edas, the Ralstons, Kieran Tierney, etc., were all given an extra couple of weeks of holidays. We could have had all those players in right on day one of the pre-season, but a lot of them were given 2, 3, 4 weeks. So people like Dyson Maida were actually late into pre-season training, and there's a thought that they maybe weren't 100% ready for game one of the season and weren't 100% ready. Okay, all right. It's an interesting point, Lauren. I didn't really read into great depth about what Russell Martin and his team did or didn't do at Loch Lomond. I thought it was an interesting thing to do. you're having one of the worst starts to the season in the history of the club, or the history of the two clubs put together, and you take the players off swimming at Loch Lomond. It's an interesting thing to do. I think personally the thing to do maybe would be to get all the players in for a behind closed door, clear the air meeting, try and get the coaches, the players, the captains, and the important players all together, instead they went off swimming, which is interesting. Yes. Well, personally, Clashman Numpty, I'm not saying I want Mike Bassett to be the Celtic manager, but I would like a manager who at least has more than one plan of playing football. It feels to me, I'm maybe not, I fully admit I'm not nearly as clever as a couple of other people who do Celtic YouTube channels, Celtic live streams, etc. One of them's got coaching badges, which he frequently mentions to people when he's going through all these post-match summaries and his pre-match previews and stuff. But I would really love a Celtic manager who's got a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D, and the players very quickly move from plan A into plan B to plan C to plan D. I would love to see Celtic changing the way they play to having more people in midfield, maybe three centre backs, and having two wing backs. We've got players who can play those positions. We've got a Benjamin Negrin who's able to play 4 different positions. He has played them all successfully in his career before. Balakwisha's played about 4 different positions. Negrin, Balakwisha, Czerniecki are all able to play as a second striker. Negrin's played actually as a main striker many times. Obviously, Dyson Maid is a very adaptable player as well. But I just think, couldn't Celtic use kind of like in the good old days, we used to play Chris Sutton and John Hartson with Henrik Larsson off them. So big, tall centre forward, bit of a target man centre forward, and then a wee nippy inside forward type person. It worked well under Martin O'Neill. He was quite flexible in the way that he played his formations, his tactics. Rodgers just seems to have one way of playing football, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, which is why it gets so frustrating when we don't break down teams who are defending super deep. We'd practiced playing against teams who played super deep when we played Livingston, when we played St Mirren, when we played Falkirk. Actually, we're fairly open, but everybody we play in Scotland, bar Rangers, pretty much plays super deep against us, and even they play quite deep against us as well. And I really would love to see Celtic changing the way they play, not necessarily the starting 11. In terms of the starting formation, it's a perfectly reasonable 4-3-3 with the fullbacks pushing forward, all grand. Bringing your wide players in centrally to support the main striker, grand as well. But I just would like to see us do something different. So when we make our substitutions at 60 minutes, as Rodgers nearly always does do, it's just like we take off one winger and put on another winger. We take off one central midfielder, we put on another central midfielder. We never change things up. We never try and get an extra player in midfielder to win the midfield battle. We never put in a second striker behind the main striker to try and overcome teams playing super deep. Yes. My personal bit, so again, reading a few different Celtic sites and football sites, it does look like the plan was for Kieran Tierney to be up to playing 90 minutes per game around about now. Unfortunately, whatever happened to him in the Scotland call-up squad that caused him to drop out of that, something happened to him. So I guess he must have got kicked or something, and it's kind of put him back a couple of weeks in terms of his training. So apparently the medical staff, the physios, the sports science people, Brendan Rodgers, the coaches, Kieran Tierney was supposed to be back to 90 minutes per game as of the Kilmarnock game last Sunday. Unfortunately, he's been put back a couple of weeks because of the injury that he had on Scotland duty, which kept him out of training for about 8 days. So it is a concern that Kieran Tierney isn't up to playing football more than 60 minutes. Now, my personal feeling, and again, other people may have a different opinion, I actually thought that Celtic looked far better against Kilmarnock at the weekend when Sirachi was left back. I thought actually Sirachi was playing so well, there was no need to take him off and put on Kieran Tierney, because Kieran Tierney, to me, looked a bit slow, a bit stiff, a bit lacking match practice. And actually, Kilmarnock got a lot more progress down Kieran Tierney's side of the pitch than they had done, I thought, than when Sirachi had been on the pitch. And I actually thought Sirachi and Donovan, alongside Chineke, were the three Celtic players who actually played well on Sunday. Big credit to Iheanacho stepping up to take that penalty in the 96th minute, quite similar to Adam Ida stepping up to take a added time penalty against Hibs in his first proper Celtic match as well. So now again, I wouldn't be averse to Kieran Tierney moving into a left centre backs. I wouldn't be, actually, personally, I think if Celtic went to playing some form of three central defenders at the back, wouldn't have a problem with that at all. We have got the players who can play in a back three as three centre backs. Kieran Tierney being a great example. Liam Scales has played in that position quite a few times for the Irish national side. Carter Vickers can play that position. Alistair Johnston, in terms of Canadian football, American football, American League football, and playing for Canada, has played quite regularly as a right-sided centre back as well. So we have got players who could play as a three central defenders at the back, then having overlapping fullbacks, or fullbacks who are pushing further forward. Dyson Maida's actually been playing as a left wing back for Japan quite a bit recently as well. So we have got a lot of players who could play those different roles. I think there is a lot to be said for having Kieran Tierney playing as a left centre back. He's played that position quite often, obviously, for Scotland, with Andy Robertson as the conventional left back. It still allows Kieran Tierney to get forward into the final third as well. So I think there's a lot to be said for using Tierney as a left centre back. Probably would mean a bit less running about for him, which might be a good option for him as well. Yes, I'm glad there's someone out there that agrees with me. I thought Sirachi had a great game or a good game, not a great game, a good game on Sunday. Defended well, pushed forward into midfield, pushed forward into the final third. The cross he delivered for Dyson Maida's diving header, I thought, was an absolutely brilliant ball. Really good delivery, and it's one of his good skills that he brought from his football all round the world. I have to say that I completely agree, Cashman, up there. I think that Ray Hatate has been one of Celtic's most disappointing players this season. I would say that of all Celtic's players, he probably is the one that's disappointed me the most. Is Ray Hatate. Benjamin Negrin has so far seemed to be either hot or cold. He played really well against Aberdeen. He played really well against Livingston. Otherwise, his performances, I think, have all been rather poor. He and Hatate, I thought, were pretty atrocious against Kilmarnock at the weekend. It doesn't look like the system that Rodgers has got them playing is getting the best out of Hatate or Negrin. And for me also, Carl McGregor has often been very disappointing this season. I would really want my captain, as McGregor is in this team, to step up against Kirat Almaty. to step up against Rangers, and he didn't. He was kind of anonymous in all those 3 matches. It's kind of the game you really would want your captain to step up and lead the team. The kind of thing you might well expect a Scott Brown, Neil Lennon, and Paul Lambert to have done in the olden days, stepping up and being a captain, stepping up and leading the team, getting them all fired up and getting them going. Lauren, you make a brilliant point. It's difficult to know whether Hatate did or didn't want to leave during the summer. With him being injured in May and then having spent a few weeks out at Celtic in rehab, then apparently going home to Japan to complete his rehab in Japan, I suspect that because he was not playing football for 6-8 weeks due to injury, it probably meant that any team who wanted to buy him this summer got cold feet and decided not to buy him because he hadn't been fit, and no one would be very certain as to whether he was going to come back fit and firing on all cylinders. He certainly isn't firing on all cylinders, whether that's because he's still injured, whether it's because of his injury in May and June, rehabbing into July. Maybe he's just a few weeks behind in terms of his preparation, in terms of pre-season. Maybe once he's had several more games under his belt, he will start to perform the way that Rio Hatate did for most of the last season. Last season was one of Celtic's most important players, played practically every game. He played actually every game up until the Aberdeen game when he got injured, which then meant he missed the last couple of games of the season. Good. Good morning to you, Bonnie, as well, from across in Sydney in Australia. It's always very interesting getting fans and commentators and people from all around the world. Another far-flung fan that contributes a lot to the channel, guy who lives in Johannesburg, although he doesn't tend to participate much in the live streams. Yes, I think again, one wonders with McGregor, is he fully fit? Rodgers certainly doesn't seem to ever want to drop McGregor. Even against Falkirk, when he didn't start the game, McGregor got brought on when we were already winning the game, and I can't really see the reason for playing McGregor week in, week out, especially because he does have a chronic problem with his Achilles tendon area. The kind of thing that the best way to treat it is proper rest. And what seems to happen is when it really flares up, they inject it a bit and then they give him a couple of weeks off and then straight back into playing football. As is nearly always the case, the player who's played the most minutes for Celtic so far this season is Callum McGregor. Ordinarily in a team, it's your goalkeeper. So in our case, Kasper Schmeichel. Previous years, it would have been Joe Hart. But Callum McGregor virtually always leads the table in terms of minutes played, and I think Celtic should be looking far more to give Callum McGregor the odd game off, far more he to be the one that gets brought off at 60 minutes or 70 minutes, etc., to give him a bit of a rest at the end, particularly in games where we're already winning and we've got a nice lead to defend. But McGregor seems to play 90 minutes every week, or 2 lots of 90 minutes in certain weeks, and never seems to get a proper rest. And it wouldn't be the least bit surprising on Sunday if he is one of the ones who gets played right from the start. Yes, so Lauren, I totally agree. Midfield, for me, that's been the one area of the pitch that just has not been working at all. And the fact that midfield's not working does have a secondary effect on the type of chances that Maeda, Ida, Yamada, Kenny, etc., get to score in the opposition box. Also, if the midfielder's not doing its job, it does mean the wide players, be it Forrest, Yang, Chinyeki, Balakwisha, whomever, they're not going to get a proper pass either. Now, to be fair, Chinyeki on Sunday with Kilmarnock, he seemed to come for the ball far better than Balakwisha, I think Palakwisha maybe is a player who does better when he's actually fed the ball, or the ball's played behind the defence for him to run onto. Tanyeki has a lot more tricks in his bag to beat players than Balakwisha does. Balakwisha is actually a player who's got good delivery, good scorer, good passer, good creator. But I think he probably is a player who needs that wee bit more space. And in Scottish football, he's not going to get a lot of space in many of the games. So we might actually see, once Balakwisha is fully integrated into the team, he's actually a better player in Europe than he is in many of the Scottish games. A wee bit the same way that Arnie Engels was. Yes. So our first Europa League game is next Wednesday rather than next Thursday, because they are splitting that game over the first set of fixtures over 2 nights rather than 1 night. So it'll be our only Wednesday game in the Europa League. I think Clashman team, again, as you so often do, that's a brilliant point. It certainly doesn't appear that Celtic have been doing anything in terms of succession planning to replace Callum McGregor. I think it was quite relevant that he retired from international football. I think he realised himself with his chronic Achilles tendonitis problem, that he was struggling to play for Celtic and struggling to play for Scotland. So quite rightly, he decided to retire from Scottish football, which in theory should give him more of a rest period, 3 or 4 times a year. I think Celtic also need to have succession planning, and having someone in the squad now who's going to take over from Callum McGregor. I think probably this might well, as you say, be Callum McGregor's last season as a first choice player and the regular team captain. There might be an argument to have Callum McGregor remaining as the club captain, although not being the captain on the pitch every week. That was a wee bit the similar. Tommy Boyd had that role for a wee while, where he wasn't playing very much, but he was kind of the club captain, so a bit of the person who would go to press conferences, do some of the PR and some of the promotional stuff, a lot of the interviews and stuff. So. Well, great news that it's lovely and warm and sunny in Sydney. It's a bit cold and wet and dark here where I live, so it's lovely that it's have a sunny day for you. I think Luke McCowan is a very adaptable player. Certainly, a couple of times when he's come on, he's given Celtic a real sort of spark in midfield. Many people have proposed that Paulo Bernardo and Arnie Engels were both being lined up to be the Callum McGregor deeper lying midfield role. Engels has dropped back there a couple of times when McGregor's been subbed off or not playing. Paulo Bernardo's been in that role. No one's really taken that role on and made it their own. To be fair, I thought Tomoki Iwata, when he was with us before Rodgers sold him a couple of years ago, I thought Tomoki Iwata was actually playing that role really quite well, mopping things up in midfield, buffer on the back four, linking up with the wide players, linking up with the other midfielders. I thought Iwata actually had a lot of skills in that area, but he didn't seem ever to get into Rodgers' good book, and Rodgers got rid of him. And of course, Iwata, like a lot of players that have left Celtic recently, has gone on to big things at other clubs. Interesting that Bozen Lawal, who again Rodgers said wasn't good enough to play for Celtic, has actually really come into his own this season, playing for Stoke in the English Championship. Yes, so yep, McCowan's role so far this season and last season has been an impact player off the bench. A couple of games this season, he has come on and played as an impact player and made a bit of a difference, and brought a slightly different thing to the midfield. For me, the last couple of times he's come on as a sub, he doesn't seem to have really made any change to the team. Yep, I think Luke McCowan is a really important player at Celtic. He seems quite happy to be a player who's on the bench, making the odd start here and there. Those sorts of players are very, very important at a club. McCowan's actually quite an adaptable player. In theory, actually, Celtic could play him out wide on the left. He's played out wide on the left as a sort of a left winger type of role or left midfielder role. So he is a player that I think actually is important. Important at Celtic. Whether he could reliably, repeatably play as a more defensive number 6 style midfielder, I'm not certain. But he is a player who gives 100% for Celtic every time he comes on. Excuse me. It certainly doesn't feel like at the moment Brendan Rodgers is making any plans in terms of Celtic's long-term future. So it makes one think that Rodgers' intention all along has been to manage 3 seasons and then move on to another team. In that, if he was planning for the future, he might well be trying to integrate the Engels, the McCowans, the Paulo Bernardos, whomever, to be a McGregor replacement, because with McGregor's age, McGregor's chronic ankle Achilles tendon problem, we do need a solution for that position in the longer term. No, I would not make. My personal feeling is McCowan would not be a good Celtic captain. If I was to choose a player to be Celtic captain out of our current squad, the one I would choose would be Alistair Johnston, in that he is a vocal player, which Cameron Carter-Vickers is not a vocal player. Cameron Carter-Vickers tends to be, from what I see, a very quiet player on the pitch. It's much more Scales and Austin Trusty when they're playing beside him. They're the ones who actually do the organising. Alistair Johnston, for me, is a leader on the pitch. He's a leader off the pitch. He is by far the best player Celtic have got for doing press conferences. He seems to be a very deep-thinking player. And I personally would be, if Cal McGregor stopped being Celtic captain, Alistair Johnston's the one that I would promote to be the Celtic captain on and off the pitch. Unfortunately, Alistair Johnston was a wee bit hiding his cards when he was asked about ambitions of playing in other leagues. He kind of said that his dream had always to play for Celtic. He's playing for a big club. He really loves playing in Europe, but he wouldn't discount the fact that he might move on to the English Premier League in the future. Yep. No, so my personal feeling is I don't think at the moment Brendan Rodgers is doing much in the term of long-term planning. It feels as if, especially with us now having been kicked out of the Champions League, that Rodgers' intention is to get a double or treble and then move on, adding to his total as a Celtic manager, which would certainly put him up near the Jock Steins, etc. I think he's second in the second in the list of Celtic's most successful managers of all time. I think he's got a long way to go to get anywhere near Jock Stein, but yeah, my personal feeling is probably Kieran Tierney is the one, assuming that he can get himself back to full fitness, that probably is the one who would step up if and when Cal McGregor does either cut back on his playing time or does leave the team to be presumably moving into Celtic's coaching team. I think Tierney would be the one to get promoted. all I would say is with Tierney's injury record, possibly having Alistair Johnston, certainly as his vice captain, but I personally would go for Alistair Johnston in terms of the fact he is a leader on and off the pitch. He's a vocal player, he organises players. I am 100% certain had Alistair Johnston been on the pitch in that second leg against Kirat Almaty in Kazakhstan, he would have been leading the players. He would have been going around the players at 90 minutes and 105 minutes, 120 minutes, getting everybody fired up and everybody going. Celtic were very, very quiet at the breaks in the Kirat Almaty game. Yes, so there are an awful lot of people out there like you, Lauren, and I've been this way for actually pretty much since Brendan Rodgers came back to the club 2 and a bit years ago. I didn't see him signing for any longer than 3 years. I don't see him staying at Celtic next year. No matter what the board does or doesn't do, no matter the contract offer, I think he is planning the longer term for his career. If he was so committed to Celtic, he wouldn't have left Celtic first time around to go to Leicester. He deserted us then. Clearly, the move to Leicester was something that he and his agent had been brewing up for a bit. It wasn't a sort of sudden, last minute, impulse decision. It clearly was something that he and his agent had been looking at for weeks and weeks. After all, if you think about Ange Postecoglou, he came in practically within an hour or two of Nottingham Forest sacking their manager. Ange Postecoglou came in. You don't have contracts, etc., all lined up and negotiated and confirmed in 1 hour, like it was between sacking one manager and Postecoglou joining. The way that Postecoglou started off at Nottingham Forest, he may not still be in that job at the end of the season anyway. Yes, I'd read that there are certainly some clubs in England, Everton being one of the main ones who has talked about signing Alistair Johnston. One of the Milan clubs last season, reportedly, in the January transfer window, I think it was, were looking at possibly signing Alistair Johnston. At that point, that all got kicked into the long grass. That probably is the case. I haven't done any deep research on that, Pat, but that certainly would probably ring true. Certainly, our form in the second half of the season last season was much poorer than it had been in the first half of the season. I think part of that coincided with Nicholas Kuhn's form having a bit of a dip. I think it coincided a bit with Callum McGregor's Achilles tendonitis problem flaring up a bit more. I think obviously it coincided a bit with Dyson Myra moving in from wide left to playing more centrally. I think there was quite a number of different factors. So if that's the case, we haven't won 5 games in a row since last November. I would think that's entirely possible. Okay, so Sligo Boy, agree 1,000,000%. I think the bread and butter is Scottish football. So the bread and butter is winning the league every year. Winning the league gets us into the Champions League at some stage or other. If Celtic have an especially good Europa League this year, that'll help in terms of our qualifying position in a couple of years' time. If Aberdeen have a good season in the Conference League, which is entirely possible if they get their act together, that again helps Scotland get their coefficient up, and then helps the Celtic have a better qualifying position. There is an argument to say that Celtic actually should have if we know that we're going to be starting our Champions League qualifiers in early July, like we have done a couple of times in the past, maybe we actually don't really bother with much of a post-season break for the players. We have a an abbreviated postseason. We start the pre-season much earlier. We get the players bang on form, bang on fitness, right for the first Champions League qualifier game. We've been caught out quite a number of times in Champions League qualifiers, obviously over the last 10 years or so, losing to a lot of teams we probably should never have lost to. Most of those teams that we've lost to, however, like Kairat Almaty, were deep into their season when we were very early in our season. So I don't think, again, our coaching staff, and in this case it's Rodgers, Kennedy, etc., our backroom sports science, physio, medical people, I don't think they got the players at their best for that first set of Champions League fixtures, which, as is being proven in terms of the money that we're going to get for the rest of the season, were probably our two most important games of the season, were those two games against Kairat Almaty. And I don't think Rodgers had the players fit physically or mentally or together as a team for that game. And there's also an argument to say that we could have well have brought in several new players. There's no real reason in retrospect why Balikwisha and Janiecki couldn't have been brought in 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks earlier. Both of them apparently were desperate to come to Celtic. The money we paid for both those two players appears to be pretty much what Hammarby and Royal Antwerp were asking for 6 weeks before. And so those players could have been, on the face of it, brought in earlier. Why they weren't brought in earlier, we'll never know, because I don't think the Nicholsons, the Mackays, etc., are going to tell us. Yes, I read that as well. That and there was another. This is so because the mandate that these supporters groups are quoting is the fact that they did a survey of 38,000 Celtic fans over the course of 3 days. I'm not sure who the 38,000 Celtic fans were. Was anybody in the audience, were they asked their opinion in the survey? I certainly wasn't asked anything. Possibly you would think, no, I'm 100% willing to say that the David 67 channel, in terms of Celtic fan sites and Celtic YouTube sites and social media, is a tiny channel. But I could have been someone that people asked. But there are lots and lots of really long-standing, dedicated, clever Celtic fans in this audience. It'd be interesting to see whether anybody was actually asked. My personal feeling is well, one of the questions I had was, are the protesting fans the noisy minority, or are they actually the majority of the fans? Is there a silent minority of fans who just want to support the players and the team and leave 100% and leave the board to run the finances? My personal feeling, that I would be in the second group. I think my plan for the last 53 years has been let support the players as much as I can, cheer them on, support them, be positive and optimistic about them whenever I can, and leave the finances, leave all the financial stuff, all the wheeling and dealing in transfer markets, the contracts, hiring managers and coaching staff, etc. Leave that to the people whose job it is to do that. I don't think I've got any of the knowledge, the expertise, and I doubt that any of the protesting people have any knowledge of how to run a football club. I doubt any of them have got any knowledge of the financial laws, the employment laws, the rules and regulations with UEFA, the agent fees, transfer fees, how to negotiate a contract, how to negotiate a transfer. And so if we did sack Nicholson and Mackay and Lowell and sack the whole board, oops. Sorry, the live stream IT thing went down there. Hopefully, nobody's left. So apologies for the. Oh, God. Sorry. Hopefully that's working again for me. Sorry. Problems with the camera, problems with the microphone, problems with the internet, etc. So hopefully people can still hear me. Apologies for things having gone down for a wee minute or two there. Yes. So the only thing, of course, that the Lord Hockey, etc., he has actually worked inside on the board, etc. But I didn't think in terms of public relations or getting fans, etc., back on the side of the club and on the side of the board. Don't think a lecture from Lord Hockey was the best in terms of public relations. Don't think the intervention of Lord Hockey was with the suggestion of Dermot Desmond or Lawwell or Nicholson, etc. But he certainly put his tuppence in. So the other one of the other things, as Lauren was pointing out, there was another meeting with all these protest groups. Combination of it would appear Celtic Supporter Club people, several of the media sites like the Celts Are Here, Hail Hail 67, Celtic Star, a few other Celtic media sites, several different associations of supporters clubs from Ireland and so on. They certainly seem to have had a big meeting again as to what their plan's going to be. I personally didn't think that the boycotting the first 12 minutes of the game against Kilmarnock at the weekend, I don't think that had any effect on anybody other than the fact that I thought Celtic were rather flat for the first 20, 30 minutes. It took Celtic quite a long time to really get into their game. Whether that was the players, whether that was the way that Rodgers sent them out, whether that was the fact that players weren't feeling very supported, feeling it very hard to play in a very, very quiet ground. There were hardly any Kilmarnock supporters. When I was watching the game on Sky Sports, there were so few fans anywhere in the ground, never mind in the Celtic end behind the goal. It certainly, I didn't certainly think that 12 minutes and coming in dribs and drabs after 12 minutes had the least effect on anybody, other than I think it made the players a bit put off their game, not supported. To be fair, after about half an hour, 45 minutes going into the second half, when Celtic were attacking at the end, where most of the Celtic fans were, the fans certainly got really noisy, big support for Celtic. I think probably the continuing support of the fans deep into added time when Celtic got the penalty, I think that probably did spur the players on to have to make a really good second effort. Kilmarnock scored with about 10 minutes to go in the game, so I think I think actually the supporters did a tremendous job supporting the players in that last 10 minutes after we conceded that equaliser from the Watson header. So I think the fans did do their job in particularly in the second half. The scenes when Iheanacho scored the goal were in some ways a bit scary, because I always hate to see fans coming to the front of this front of the stands. Hate seeing people coming onto the pitch, as there were 2 or 3 fans came onto the pitch. I hate seeing that because of the dangers of players, stewards, police, and fans getting squashed and injured and trampled on. There is talk that of increasing the protests at the Partick Thistle match, but particularly the next home match, which is against Hibs. I think when we take on Hibs in a couple of weeks' time at Celtic Park, I think we certainly need to have all the fans in from well before the kickoff, give the band singing all the songs, singing "You'll Never Walk Alone" just as the kickoff's about to come. I think it's really important for the fans to be there. However, the indications are in several of the different things that the fans are looking to have a silent protest during the game. So they'll be in the stands, but they won't be singing songs, they won't be cheering, they won't be supporting the team. There are stories about them continuing this late entry, but also early leaving at the end. So coming in 12 minutes late, leaving the game 12 minutes early, no matter what the score is, and in the between bit, not cheering, not supporting. I can't really see the point of turning up for a football match and not cheering your team on, because surely that's the whole point of being there as a supporter, is to cheer the team on and help them win the game. Particularly at Celtic Park, which can be an incredibly intimidating place for players to play. Some of the best players in world football have said that Celtic Park on a European night is one of the hardest places they've ever had to play football. So people like Alessandro Del Piero, for one, put forward Celtic as being one of the most intimidating places he ever had to play football because of the Celtic fans. So I, for one, wouldn't be in favour of Celtic's fans upping their protests. So one of the proposals Celtic have talked about in the past is making Celtic Park even bigger, renewing and renovating the stand, bringing that more up into the 21st century. One of the things which I did take some pleasure from was there didn't seem to be too much in the way of Celtic fans confronting other Celtic fans who went into the game early. There didn't seem to be, from what I've read or saw, any particular problems of Celtic fans coming in late and causing fights and disputes and so on with the stewards, the police, etc., which is of some comfort, because I did have visions of Celtic fans coming in late and berating the Celtic fans who'd come in early. I did have views, plans, thoughts of the fans confronting the stewards and the police, etc. But happily, that seems to have got. Happily, that seems to have not happened on Sunday. Yes, yes. So it was. For a lot of reasons, I was disappointed with the crowd for the game against Kilmarnock. Kilmarnock didn't seem to turn up. Celtic fans turned up very late. At least most of them did. But when they did turn up and get going, they were nice and noisy. I did actually wonder whether one of the things that Kilmarnock and Sky and the Scottish Premiership might have done was actually delay the kickoff until the Celtic fans came in, because certainly in terms of the stewards and the police, it might well have actually been a good idea for them to delay the kickoff. Quite often, if there are delays of players getting to the venue or fans getting to the venue, the sometimes do delay the kickoff by 10, 15 minutes until the fans, etc., have come into the ground. So I did wonder whether maybe Sky and the Scottish Premiership would have clubbed together to delay the kickoff so that all the Celtic fans were in the ground. But that didn't happen. So, in terms of the Partick Thistle game on Sunday, which of course is our next game, interesting to see what you feel yourself in terms of who you think might well be Celtic's starting players. Do you think Rodgers is going to go for his best 11? Do you think Rodgers is going to go for a bit of a mix and match game team like he did against Falkirk? Certainly, Kelechi Iheanacho seems to be Celtic's current number 1 and number 2 striker. For him to really come into his own in the Europa League matches starting in 6 days' time, we really need Iheanacho to be as match fit as possible. So, could well be a question of starting Iheanacho against Partick Thistle. Yes, Lauren, I totally agree with you. I think it's a bit like there's a big debate in American politics and British politics about freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is for me and you and Clash Band Numpty all to get to say what they get to say and what they want to say within the rules and the laws of the country. Sorry, people. The internet connection's being a wee bit unstable again this evening. So as I was saying, important in terms of everyone's got the right to protest, no doubts about that. Everyone's got the right to their opinion, no doubts about that. But we also have to be, if we are going to have protests, or we also have to acknowledge that other people don't want to protest, that other people just want to support the club, support the players on and off the pitch. I think a lot of Celtic fans want to be at Celtic Park to hear all the songs, to hear all the here You'll Never Walk Alone. I think part of being a Celtic fan is moments like that where everybody's singing in unison, everyone's got their scarves in the air. I think that's part of being a Celtic supporter, is that tremendous community spirit on and off the pitch. I think it's remembering Celtic's great history as well, going back the best part now of 140 years. All these things are terribly important for Celtic. And everybody who is protesting and angry has to accept that other people maybe aren't nearly as angry as them, which also comes back to my uncertainty over who these 38,000 people were who have given the mandate to all these supporter groups to lead the protests and so on. And if I haven't actually seen, apparently this evening was the deadline for buying the Europa League tickets for the 4 Europa League games that Celtic will have in the initial phase, assuming that we get into the second phase, as is our hope and expectation. I haven't actually seen any kind of figures as to whether Celtic's fans have taken up those tickets or not. As I said last week, Celtic have actually priced their Europa League package considerably lower than all other British teams in the Europa League, significantly lower than our cross-city rivals, lower than the 2 English teams in the Europa League as well. And it does look like the board, etc., were looking to sort of send out an olive branch to the supporters by bringing the Europa League ticket package down to a lower level. Still quite an expensive thing, but certainly better than it could be. Cheaper than our cross-city rivals are doing. Cheaper than the 2 English teams are doing. Yes, so my personal feeling is that given the waiting lists for things like season tickets, etc., reportedly there's a massive number of Celtic fans all over Scotland, Britain, Ireland, etc., who are desperate for season tickets. I suspect that any Europa League tickets that have not been sold will get quickly snapped up by Celtic fans elsewhere. As I said, keep on reading in all the Celtic fan sites and sports sites and so on, and in the Record and Go Radio and stuff, is the fact that it's the majority of Celtic fans who want the board sacked, who want Nicholson sacked, etc. My personal feeling is there's a very vocal, noisy, political proportion of Celtic fans who are leading all the protests, and that probably the silent majority are wanting to almost supporting the club. I don't know, Clashman Numpty. We've got. If we're talking about left wingers in the club, we certainly do have more than enough left wingers, which makes me think that Brendan Rodgers' plan with Dyson Maida is to have him as the main central striker, given the fact that Chinyeki plays preferentially left wing, Balakwisha plays preferentially left wing, Jota can play both sides, but he's played more left wing than right wing. Forrest can play both sides. Yang can play both sides. I don't know whether Lowell has been a bad boy or not. there's been a lot of if we're happy to accept that people are briefing against Brendan Rodgers from within the club, in that case, it's also perfectly reasonable to accept that people are briefing against Peter Lawwell from within the club, which again isn't a very healthy thing. If there's factions within the club, that's not terribly good. And so, but also, as someone was saying a wee bit earlier on, I think Brendan Rodgers has been angling to look at options for 2026, summer 2026 on, which is perfectly reasonable. He's got a career to plan. I never thought he was going to stay for longer than 3 years. A lot of things he's said and done over the last 2.5 years didn't suggest he was going to be at Celtic for the long term. A lot of the things, if you were coming into a club, a bit like when Alex Ferguson left Aberdeen to go to Man United, when he went into Man United, he set things up not just for that season, which didn't go terribly well, but he set up for the season after the season after the season after. So one of the first things that Ferguson did when he went to Man United was to ensure that all the best players in the region were signing to be Man United players in the long run, which is where the Nicky Butts, the Neville brothers, Scholes, Giggs, David Beckham came from a bit further south, but he got some super talented young middle teenagers in with the idea of bringing them through to be first team players in 2 or 3 years' time. So he very much at the start of his Man United career was looking to the future, and he was given by Man United 2 or 3 years to become a success. He also brought in a few players and got rid of a few players and then built the squad. And then his real success years is when his teenagers became older, young adults like the Beckhams, the Giggs and Scholes and so on. And then he really turned into a really good team at that point. So I think if Rodgers was looking really for a long-term career at Celtic, he would really have been bringing through more and more of the teenagers and planning for the future right from day one. And that doesn't seem to be really the case. Possibly that's an explanation for some of the signings in this transfer window, is that the recruiting team and the scouting team is planning for the post-Rodgers year 26 onwards. So we'll find out. Yeah, yes. I think that is one of the really interesting things that has struck me in the post-Kairat Almaty fallout of us not qualifying because we didn't play well enough in those 2 games, is that Brendan Rodgers has kind of come out of this smelling of roses, and an awful lot of the fans seem to have rallied around Brendan Rodgers. I wasn't actually a big fan of Brendan Rodgers' press conference last Friday. There were a lot of questions I would have wanted the Celtic manager not to have answered. And I can certainly think, had people like Jock Stein, Martin O'Neill, Gordon Strachan, Ange Postecoglou been asked those sorts of questions in a press conference, they would have said, next question, or pivoted from that question to talk about the game against Kilmarnock, talk about the European campaign, talk about the players that were at the club and developing them and stuff. I think Rodgers answered far too many questions that he shouldn't have answered, far too many questions that were really issues that he, as the manager of the club, shouldn't really be talking about. Now, having said that, the people like Michael Nicholson and the chief financial officer, Mackay, they should be talking in public, or they should have a spokesperson who talks in public about these things. It shouldn't be down to Brendan Rodgers. It shouldn't be down to Callum McGregor, who did a better job of not answering questions and talking more about his teammates and talking more about the game ahead. I thought Rodgers answered too many questions, and a lot of the answers he answered threw other people under the bus or got other people into potential trouble. and a lot of the people seem to have rounded on Peter Lawwell since that as well. I don't think that's good for the club in the long run. Whether we like Nicholson, whether we like Lawwell, whether we like Mackay, whether we like anybody, it's important for the club to stick together, and like it or not, those board members are part of the club, and they're doing a job within the club to keep the club financially very, 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 very secure, unlike a lot of our rivals who are not very financially secure. And I like the fact that Celtic are financially secure. I like the fact that Celtic's got tons of money in the bank. If they were going to, particularly if there is this plan, as is being rumoured in a few years' time, for there to be a pan-European league where you play week in, week out in Europe. You don't play any domestic matches. You play only European matches. And if that was the case, Celtic's got tons of money in the financial coffers to really expand the club, expand the squad. If we move to higher money, higher prestige leagues. So, and the thing about being a board member or chief executive, it's not just this season, it's not just this year. You've got to financially plan for 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, because you've also got to take into consideration player salaries, non-playing people's salaries as well, all these other thoughts as well. You've also got to take into consideration there could be another COVID shutdown which affects finance. There could be a financial crash. If the American economy keeps on crashing, it could cause a global crash as well. So there's all these things you have to do if you're a financial person. So it's not just about players on the pitch. There are other things behind the pitch, behind that, to keep the club solvent and going forward. Well, we'll find out whether that happens. The fact that Scotland's not in the EU isn't a factor, because Celtic's part of the European Club Association, and Celtic is part of UEFA, and Scotland's part of UEFA. So whether we're in the EU or not in the EU, Celtic is still a big, big club in terms of the ECA, and is one of the leaders in the European Club Association. And Scotland is still very much part of UEFA. So us not being in the EU won't have any impact at all on there being a pan-European league, in that the pan-European league also would be proposed to involve teams who are not a part of the EU as well. Some of the countries in Europe who are not EU are part of the UEFA, and they are part of the ECA, and they'd be part of the pan-European league. There probably would be a plan to have one or maybe two teams from Ukraine, assuming the Ukraine situation settles down. But certainly some Eastern European countries aren't part of the EU, but they are part of UEFA and are part of the ECA. Yes, so Israel's not in the EU. Israel's not in it is in UEFA. So, to the best of my knowledge, there would be no plans to have an Israeli team in the supposed planned few years down the line European Super League. So you got put on the back burner because of legal reasons. Those legal reasons have all disappeared, and supposedly the current Champions League format of this big league type thing was a forerunner for a pan-European league. Because in time, I suspect that the Real Madrids, the Barcelonas, the Liverpools, the Arsenals, the Man Cities, all of them will decide that they want to move away from, have less control from UEFA and more control of themselves, which is where the European Club Association, which is linked to the EU, linked to UEFA, but is definitely a different part of it, and is independent, although working closely with UEFA. Yes. there are rumours that Dermot Desmond is selling one of his big business interests. It's a healthcare companies which he co-owns with a couple of other Irish billionaires. I'm not quite sure where that puts Celtic, whether that might mean that Dermot Desmond, rather than being 34% owner of Celtic, would look to buy other people's shares to become a 50% owner of Celtic. Certainly having £4 billion would certainly give him more than enough financial clout to buy lots and lots of shares. Whether he would take some of that £4 billion he gets for the healthcare company and invest that in Celtic, that's another possibility. It's an interesting theory, and I read that story myself. I wasn't personally terribly sure how it fitted in with Celtic, whether that would encourage Dermot Desmond to sell his shares in Celtic, which would be worth a very big amount of money. I think if someone was to buy Celtic as such, they would have to be an incredibly rich person or an incredibly rich organisation. Think about the Family Sports Group that owns Liverpool, or where it's a conglomeration of very rich American billionaires who own Liverpool and own several other clubs around America and Europe as well. So coming back to the game against Partick Thistle at the weekend, what are your thoughts regarding the score for the game against Partick Thistle at the weekend? My personal feeling is that Celtic are going to win quite comfortably, no matter who we put on the pitch. At the moment, assuming everyone's fit and able to play, and that Ionash has had a good week of training, and that Balakwisha and Tanyeki have had a good week of training, I think Celtic certainly should comfortably win 3 or 4-0 on Sunday against Partick Thistle. I think it's the perfect opportunity to give a few of the backup players a start. I think it's a very good opportunity to give a few players like McGregor, Tierney, Carter Vickers, maybe a complete, and Maeda a complete weekend off. All those players have played a lot of football over recent times. Tierney, McGregor, and Carter Vickers have all got a lot of injury problems. I think Dyson Maeda, the way that Rodgers has his team set up, very much it would appear Dyson Maeda is going to be our number one striker centrally for the European matches, with Iheanacho as being the player to come off the bench. In that reason, I think he'll need to protect Dyson Maeda as much as he can in the Scottish games. Hopefully that means that Shin Yamada, Johnny Kenny get a bit of a run out in Scottish football. Oh dear. It always has struck me as being rather unusual that Israel gets to be part of UEFA, part of European football, in that it is not part of Europe under any possible stretch of the imagination. It's not part of Europe in terms of geography. It's not part of Europe in terms of culture. It's not part of Europe in terms of history. It just simply is a political thing, and that Israel couldn't be part of a North African or an Eastern Asian coalition of countries because of political factors. So UEFA has been given Israel as a country, so that they get to play club international football and international national football. there are a lot of very, very amusing comments in the comment section, some of which I can't put up because of there are certain rules and regulations regarding YouTube content, and there are certain things I'm not supposed to. If this is supposed to be family friendly, if this is supposed to be a channel that is monetized, not that I'm doing this for the money, not that I'm actually earning any money as such from the channel. I think YouTube has given me, in 2 years, has given me two small amounts of money as what the channel's actually earned. But it is nice for the channel to be monetized, because in theory, if I do get a bit of money from doing this semi-retirement job, it does allow me to buy better quality cameras, better quality mics, better quality in IT, which stops the live stream crashing mid-word, mid-speech. It's Sligo Boy. You make a brilliant point that as I say, it's more the English Premier League and the English Football League that was blocking Celtic and Rangers joining 20 years ago. A lot of the big teams in England were keen on it. Sky Sports were very, very, very keen on it, but it was the lower half teams in the English Premier League and the teams in the English Championship that basically blocked Celtic and Rangers joining the English Premier League back in the early 2000s, 2010 time. I think about the time of when Martin O'Neill led the renaissance of Celtic, leading into the Gordon Strachan years. That was around about the time 20 years ago that Sky Sports and a lot of the big English teams wanted Celtic and Rangers into their league because they recognised Celtic with 60,000 and Rangers with 45,000 seater stadiums were far better than having Bournemouth and Brentford and Southampton and all the sort of small teams. So in theory, well, I say I'm semi-retired. In essence, I haven't worked for a couple of years, but due to a lot of different things, having worked very hard for 35 years, it's decided to have a bit of a sabbatical, and then the sabbatical turned into doing this to keep myself mentally active and give me something to do. And then because I've enjoyed this so much, I've carried on doing this, and happily financially we're able to, me and Mrs. Davis 67 are able to have me just being a house husband type person. Yes, Gordon Strachan, not the most popular Celtic manager of all time, but I think it's actually been quite interesting when I do the sort of the daily trivia questions, is looking back to some of the players that Gordon Strachan had in his team, and yet he still managed to get Celtic winning lots of trophies in Scotland, winning the league, etc. But he also got Celtic into the last 16 of the Champions League. We got so close to beating AC Milan over 2 legs. We lost over 2 legs. I think it was 1-0. Rather dodgy non-penalty kick given when Paolo Maldini handled a ball that was going into the goal. It's quite remarkable how successful Gordon Strachan got Celtic to be domestically and in Europe, with not actually the best bunch of players at his disposal. To be fair, he did have one of Celtic's greatest ever players in Shunsuke Nakamura in his time, and 1 or 2 other very, very good players. But a lot of the players that Gordon Strachan managed to mould into a really good team were players that were kind of run-of-the-mill players, players that tried very, very hard. And I think Gordon Strachan's actually a wee bit, in my opinion, underestimated as a Celtic manager. He didn't have the best of Celtic players to manage. But also he had to manage at a time where Rangers still had a lot of money, a lot of good players, and were still breaking all the financial rules. So Yes, yep, quite right. Paul McEwen, sorry. Gordon Strachan took us out the Champions League qualifying groups, or took him out the group stage into the last 16 stage. One of my favourite European campaigns of all time was that one when we played Man United. We got so close to beating them at Old Trafford, and then one of the greatest moments of my Celtic career as a fan, as a person watching, was that free kick that Shunsuke Nakamura scored against them to beat them at Celtic Park. One of my absolute all-time favourite goals was that free kick, and he took us through the qualifying that group into the knockout stage, and it was a long time until we got into the knockout stage again. So I think lots of praise for Gordon Strachan getting us out the group stage twice, and giving us half a chance. Yes, no, Gordon Strachan. He was an unpopular choice to be Celtic manager. He wasn't very popular with the fans, even though he delivered quite a lot of success. He wee bit similar to Ronnie Dahlia. Ronnie Dahlia actually at least didn't have the strongest Rangers side and strongest competition in his years, but I think Gordon Strachan did lose a bit to the fact that he was a lifelong non-Celtic fan, a lifelong non-Celtic player. I think he did do a good job taking over from Martin O'Neill. Took over when Celtic's finances were just starting to dip a wee bit after with a bit of a drop down in TV money. The squad certainly wasn't as strong under Strachan as it had been under Rodgers. Under O'Neill. Also, a few of the players that had been so great under Martin O'Neill left the club, got a bit older, etc. as well. The Chris Suttons and so on as well. So. And certainly, I'm a big fan of Gordon Strachan. A big fan of the way that Gordon Strachan would speak to journalists and diffuse difficult questions. And I just wish that Brendan Rodgers, a wee bit more in his press conferences, took a bit of a leaf out of the book of Ange Postecoglou and Gordon Strachan and Jock Stein and Martin O'Neill in controlling the media and answering the questions that they want to answer rather than just answering questions. Yes. So Gordon Strachan, straight talking, didn't suffer fools gladly. Neither did Ange Postecoglou, and I personally like the way that they manage the media far better than the way that Brendan Rodgers managed the media. Feels as if when Rodgers does a press conference, quite a lot of the people in the audience are his mates. Does appear that there are a few journalists in the Scottish sports media who are also Brendan Rodgers' mates as well, which I think certainly has helped him resurrect himself, as Lauren was saying a wee bit earlier on, after the Kirat Almaty fiasco of us getting knocked out over two legs. Rodgers seems to have come out of that smelling of roses, and has managed one way or another to get the board to get the bulk of the blame for it. Yes. The loss to Artmedia Bratislava was a pretty awful day for Celtic, and you're quite right. Strachan got a lot of the blame for that. Happily, he did actually, as I say, resurrect Celtic after that. Got us through the group stage on a couple of occasions. So, big praise for Gordon Strachan for that one. Yes, Paul McEwen has had a pretty awful start to his career at Nottingham Forest. Lost in the league, then lost in the Caribou Cup. And with the way that their chairman behaves, it would not be the least bit surprising if Ange Postecoglou is available in the unemployment queue at the end of the season. There were rumours of a couple of other clubs in Europe giving him a job before he got the Nottingham Forest job. Supposedly he was lined up for Bayer Leverkusen. Found that a wee bit difficult to believe. Lined up for Fenerbahce after Jose Mourinho was sacked by them. And I would not be the least bit surprised if Ange Postecoglou doesn't turn things around at Nottingham Forest. Wouldn't be the least bit surprised if he's available to be Celtic manager next summer. Although a lot of people who know know Ange Postecoglou don't think he'd ever come back to. He would ever go back to a club. Apparently, in his life, he says he never believes in going backwards. He always wants to move forward. So I'm not surprised. I would be surprised if he does actually agree to become Celtic's manager in the future. Brendan Rodgers, I think, is a person is much more likely to come back. I think he's also the kind of player Brendan Rodgers, who has a wee bit of a chip on his shoulder and a desire to always prove that he's right and never be wrong. And so I think he thought coming back to Celtic would give him a chance to resurrect his career, get a few more trophies in his trophy cabinet as a manager, which would then springboard him back into a bigger team, bigger league in the future. And as I say, I've read several different people saying that he's lining up an international job next summer or lining up a move to Saudi football, where obviously the money is so much bigger for managers and for players. Yes, so Nuno Espirito Santos, who was at Nottingham Forest until a couple of weeks ago, he got sacked by the chairman. I'm not quite sure what else Nuno Espirito Santos could have done at Nottingham Forest to have made the club any more successful than he did. To have got so close to Champions League football was a miracle. To get that squad into the Europa League, I thought was a tremendous performance by him last season. And for me, it was a big surprise when he got sacked. And I'm not terribly sure why he got sacked, because he couldn't really have done any more than he did at Nottingham Forest last season. So Ange Postecoglou certainly has a good squad of players at Nottingham Forest. Possibly not really the players that play Ange ball. Yes, I would suspect that Nuno Espirito Santos would probably be the first next manager in England to get sacked, which probably, as things stand, might well be West Ham, another club that it has hopes of getting into the top 10, top 6, top 8. Club that Davy Moyes did a pretty good job keeping in the upper echelons of the league. I think they're the next one who might well sack their manager, and wouldn't be a big surprise to see Espirito Santos go to them. Yes. So yes, if you think with Nottingham Forest, when I was relatively young, in the days of Brian Clough, twice European champions, English champions several seasons. Again, Brian Clough, very, very, very good manager. Was able to get the best out of his players, a bit like Alex Ferguson was able to do. So Brian Clough, great manager, and took a very unfashionable club in Nottingham Forest, turned them into European champions. Admittedly, things declined a bit under Brian Clough. They weren't really such a force after about 4 or 5 years of being at the top. Long time in the wilderness, and then combination of managers got them back into the English Premier League, and then Espirito Santos got them right to the top of the English Premier League, into the top 3-4 at one point. So he did a brilliant job. My personal feeling, Stephen, is you're quite right. I think if Ange Postecoglou is given time, I think if Ange Postecoglou is given time at Nottingham Forest, he'll turn Nottingham Forest into a better and better team. I think he is a very, very good manager. I think his style of football is always going to be popular with supporters. A lot of fans at Spurs liked the way that Tottenham played, and they were always super attacking. And I think had Postecoglou had his strongest squad, as the new Tottenham Hotspur manager does do now, that Postecoglou in his second season would have been far more successful than he was. But even saying all that, with a very, very injured squad, a very, very inexperienced squad in many ways, he managed to get them to the Europa League final and to win it. So, which of course has put them, Tottenham Hotspur, straight into the Champions League, which I think is grossly unfair that England gets to have 6 teams straight into the Champions League. Spain gets 5 teams straight into the Champions League group stage. I don't think that's good for European football. Maybe make them go through a qualifying round or two would have been far fairer. Especially because it meant several countries who are medium-sized, like us in European terms, don't have any representation in the Champions League group stage, and I don't think that's good for football in terms of progressing football. As I showed earlier on in the with those slides, it's 2004 was the last time anybody outside the big 5 leagues ever won the Champions League. And very, very few teams outside the big 5 have got anywhere near the final. Just 2 semi-finalists in all those years as well. So I don't think it's good for European football as a whole, for the bigger clubs to get bigger and bigger, and the bigger leagues to get bigger and bigger, and the medium-sized leagues and the smaller leagues like Scotland to get smaller and smaller and smaller and less importance. Not good for football. It's not good for Europe either. Yes. If Ange Postecoglou came back to Celtic tomorrow, I would be very, very happy. I don't think he won't be coming back to Celtic tomorrow. I think Rodgers will be Celtic's manager right from now until the end of the season, possibly unless somebody in England or somebody in Saudi Arabia asks him to come and be their manager. I think just like he did when he dropped us to go to Leicester, I don't think he would say no to a good offer from a big prestigious league, or say no to a big multi-million-pound contract from another club, such as in Saudi. Yes. Pat McLaughlin has a brilliant recall of Celtic games. Lots of really interesting discussions with Pat through the comment section, particularly around Celtic trivia questions. And so Pat does have a brilliant memory for games, far better than I do. In general terms, I need to always remind myself of certain games from the past. So Pat has a brilliant memory for the past. Yes. I think, as I said, the indications are that the indications are that Ange Postecoglou moves on and on and on. He doesn't move. He doesn't go back to somewhere. So he wouldn't move back to Japanese football. He wouldn't move back to Australian football, and he wouldn't move back to manage Celtic. He always sees himself moving on. Although one could argue moving from Spurs to Nottingham Forest is a slightly backward step, although, to be fair, they're both English Premier League sides, and so in some ways, yes. I think Bruges are a team that we should be aiming for in terms of where we should be now. The only thing I would say with that Clashman Numpty is the amount of money in Belgian football in terms of prize money, TV money, etc., is bigger than it is in Scotland. So Bruges do actually have a bigger pot of money that they get year in, year out through TV and through prize money and from sponsorship and stuff. But they are a club that is generally well run off the pitch, although their debt has gone up reportedly a couple of million, a million or 2 million every year. So they're slightly more in debt this year than they were in last year, and slightly more in debt that last year than they were the year before. But they're pretty much keeping themselves on an even keel, so they're not in proper debt where they're in chance of going bankrupt. And they are consistently able to achieve pretty good levels of Champions League success. In the just Bruges did get to the last 16 of the Champions League last year. They did get to the Champions League last stage in 22-23, but up until 22-23, they hadn't been in the Champions League last 16 in the previous 10 years. So Bruges, Clashman Numpty, I completely agree. Bruges are a team that we should aspire to. Bruges do, to be fair, have a bit of a financial advantage over us in terms of what their guaranteed yearly revenue is from TV money, sponsorship money, prize money, etc. And they're operating in a tier 2 league when Scotland is a tier 3 league in terms of finances and sponsorship and so on. And in terms of prestige, the Belgian league is still ahead of Scotland in terms of prestige. So it's a wee bit more difficult for Celtic to attract players from the Belgian league to come to the Scottish league, because a lot of players in the Belgian league see coming from Belgium to go to Scotland as a drop down in quality. Most players in a league either look to move to a comparable league, so like moving from Belgium to Portugal, Belgium to Holland, or moving up to a big 5 league like France, England, Italy, Spain, Germany, etc. So much the same as Dolberg. He didn't want to move down a league tier to come to Celtic from Belgium. He wanted to move to a same league, i.e. Ajax, or he wanted to move into England or Germany instead. So, but Bruges are a team certainly we should aspire to. Where they are very well managed is they do have a conveyor belt of younger players that they can bring through into the team. And that's something Celtic should have been doing for the last 20 years. And it's something successive managers have not done terribly well. And I think for long-term success, having young players to bring into the team to keep Celtic progressing is really important. And it also helps with the UEFA quotas of 4 Scottish trained and 4 homegrown players. Celtic should be doing an awful lot more behind the scenes to make their academy as strong as possible. And it certainly has helped quite a number of teams like Bruges, Red Bull Salzburg, another team who kind of punch above their weight as well. All in. Well, what I'm saying in terms of TV money is simply looking at stats on the internet. I haven't been able to verify them. Just the quoted figures for the Belgian Football League in terms of their TV contract is considerably better than it is for Scotland. They have actually, their TV money's actually dropped a bit because the TV company couldn't afford quite so much. So it's been negotiated a wee bit down, but they've still got a better basic income than Celtic does at the moment through TV money and sponsorship and etc. And again, it's difficult to verify financial stats, but it said that Bruges is a bit more in debt year by year, but not significantly so. It's not a team like Rangers who went out of business, or many teams who went out of business. They're not a team who's in financial peril. But only relating what I've read through internet sites and stuff as well. Most clubs keep their finances as silent, as secret as they can, and as best they can. Yes, so I read those stories as well. There are, but again, what it seems to be is that some ex-Everton players who also are people who speak on Radio 5 and BBC and Sky and stuff have been saying that they want Alistair Johnston to come to Everton, rather than anybody from Everton saying that they want, at least from what I've read, or that they want Alistair Johnston. So it seems much the same as we get a lot of rumours through the people who speak for on Go Radio, and people who speak or have their own podcasts like Frank McAvenny and Andy Walker, or do columns for the Scottish Sun or the Daily Record. I think quite a lot of them think they know secret things about Celtic, or they say something and suddenly it becomes a gospel fact. Haven't seen anything independently saying that Everton is looking to sign Alistair Johnston. It seemed to be much more an ex-Everton player, Kevin Kilban, who still has links to that club and has got a voice on television and Sky and BBC and stuff, who's putting forward that as a rumour. So I personally would be surprised if Alistair Johnston did go to Everton, but who knows? It's very funny. Well, we'll find out how much money Celtic's players are actually on, but not until next April. I don't think it'll be in the financial statement that's due to come out mid-September, early October, of the actual wages. If you check on the internet, there's a site called Salary Sport that quotes how much certain players are on. And the rumours are that Carter Vickers and Callum McGregor are on about £37,000 a year. There are some, £37,000 a week. That Jota is on roughly the same amount of money, and there are many stories suggesting that Kieran Tierney is on £50,000 a year. But there's no way of knowing that, because Celtic's financial figures for what things are at the moment are not going to be released for a good 18 months. Okay. I'll take your word for it. All I would say is, yes, it's so having lots and lots of money in your bank is grand, but having a league which is perceived by top quality players as being low prestige, as a lot of players now think the Scottish League is. Lots of international managers don't see the Scottish League as being a place where they want to be picking international players from. That's why O'Reilly left. That's why Kyogo left. It's because their international managers told them they wouldn't get to play for their international sides if they were playing in the Scottish Premiership. Lots of players it's an extremely long time since any player playing in Scotland ever played for England. Gareth Southgate a couple of years ago, even when Butland was playing so well as he did for Rangers a couple of years ago, he said he wasn't going to pick Butland because he wasn't playing in a proper league. So Celtic having tons and tons of money is grand, but it's whether we can attract players of the quality to spend that amount of money. That's the difficulty I think that Celtic have in terms of getting players to come and play in Scotland. Scotland is no longer perceived as being a country to come and play football in. Some players do see coming to Scotland as a good league, as a stepping stone to move up in the world, which has been the case, obviously. Matt O'Reilly came to Celtic from Fulham. His career was in the doldrums at Fulham. He came to Celtic, was with us, for 3 seasons. We then sell him on for a lot of money. We sold Jota on for a lot of money. We sold on Kieran Tierney for a lot of money. We've sold on lots of players, Odsonne Edouard, Christopher Ajer. So a lot of players do seem coming to Celtic as a stepping stone. Virgil van Dijk's another one, a wee bit further ago. So some players certainly see coming to Scotland as an ability to move their career forward, which is why the fact that Celtic were not in the Champions League of right as a pre-qualifier, I think did have an impact on this transfer window that passed, because in the past 2 or 3 we've been straight into the Champions League, and I think that did attract players like Engels to come to the club, and because they thought this was a stepping stone to moving to a bigger and better league in the future with more and more money and more prestige. So I think our problem is that Scotland is below Portugal, below Holland, below Belgium, and actually now becoming below Turkey and Greece in terms of a prestigious league to go play in, if you want to get to the bigger league. Now, one way that Celtic can get around that is by being like Bruges, being like a few other teams, and doing better in Europe, which keeps people coming in. But I think, unfortunately, Celtic are, in terms of prestige, is a bit below. In terms of prestige, I fully accept your point. That the problem, however, is that if the budget that Celtic's got can in no way compete with any of the big leagues in Europe, and there are so many players who seem happier to be on the bench at Brentford and at Bournemouth and several other clubs in England. There are even players who seem, much like Kiesgarden and Strelic, they seem keener to go and play for championship clubs rather than come to Celtic. And that's because those clubs have got massive financial clout. The English Championship is the 7th richest league in the world. So English Premier League is the richest league in the world, but the English Championship is the 7th richest league in the world. The amount of money in that league, because of the Sky parachute payments, because of the Sky TV contract, means the English Championship is a league a lot of players see now as the stepping stone to get back into the English Premier League directly, or by transfer, or to another European league. So I do possibly, if Celtic were to break their wage structure, maybe offering players £100,000 a year, £100,000 a week, maybe that would attract a few players to come and play in Scotland. The thing is, though, that they can get roughly the same amount of money and play for Bournemouth in the more prestigious league, a league where their international manager will come and watch them and put them into their squad, etc. Yes, And the bonus of playing in the English Championship is you can then step up into the English Premier League, which is an even more prestigious league. But in terms of money, in terms of prestige, in terms of all the metrics, English Championship is the 7th best league in the world to play in terms of money, in terms of prestige, in terms of quality of football, all kinds of things. Yes, I think there's actually quite a lot of quality in terms of players in Scotland. I think there's some very good games in Scotland. My personal feeling is that if Celtic were put into this year's English Premier League, with the amount of money that would give Celtic additionally, plus the money that Celtic's got in the bank, plus also Celtic then now being in a prestigious league where players want to actually come and play, I think Celtic very quickly would move from the lower half to the middle section into the top 6. I think Celtic actually, in terms of the English Premier League, with the global support, with the financial soundness of the club, would very quickly move up through the English Premier League to right towards the top, to challenge the absolute highest. Maybe I'm in a dream world. Maybe it's like the John Lennon song, Imagine, but I do imagine these things. I think Celtic could, moving into a prestigious league, which at the moment they can't do, and because we're in Scotland, I think Celtic would rapidly progress through all the leagues to get to the very top. Yes, Paul McEwen, make a brilliant point. The number of Scottish players who've gone across to play at the highest level in Italy, be it moving from Scottish clubs, as happened with a few of them, or having gone from Scottish clubs to English clubs and then English clubs into Italy, the McTominays, the Billy Gilmores, the Lewis Fergusons, the Josh Doigs, Che Adams, another sort of Scottish player, but he's actually doing fine for Torino. We'll find out how well Lennon Miller does. But entirely right, I think there's certainly a lot of quality Scottish footballers out there, be they Scottish players or some Anglo-Scots like the McTominays and the Che Adams and stuff. I think there's a lot of quality in Scottish football. And I think if Scotland was able to compete at the level that, if Celtic was able to compete at the level they deserve to compete at, they would be competing at a much higher level and also succeeding at that higher level as well. But we can't change the laws of physics, and we can't change the fact that we are a Scottish team playing in Scotland at the moment. So we can't get a bigger TV contract at the moment. Now, there is an argument to say that if Dermot Desmond does sell his healthcare company for £4 billion, that maybe if he cash injected £2 billion into Celtic, maybe, as Clashman Numpty was suggesting, Celtic could break their wage structure, and a bit like Jack Walker did at Blackburn. For those who are a bit older, about 30 years ago, he took Blackburn from sort of common garden English second tier club. He took them to the very, very top of English football. For 2 or 3 years, Blackburn were buying all the best players in England. The Chris Suttons, the Alan Shearers, the Sherwoods, the Tim Flowers, etc. So maybe if Dermot Desmond invested £2 billion in the club, maybe if some Scottish billionaire or Irish billionaire or an American billionaire with Scottish or Irish roots, maybe if they invested £2 billion, maybe we could break all the boundaries of Scottish football and break all the boundaries of Scottish football and move Celtic further and further up. And if Celtic move further and further up, that gives them more and more power in Europe. It might make Celtic more and more of a prestigious club. So I do take the argument that if they spent their money more, it's possible or likely that they would be able to move up a level. One of the snags, though, is the richer clubs are getting richer, and the second tier, third tier teams are not getting richer, and that the big leagues are getting more and more money. The lower leagues are getting less and less money in comparison. So. I think one of Stephen, you make a great point. However, what I would say is my personal feeling is that the teams who've been bought over by billionaires, so the Liverpools, the Man Cities, the Newcastles, Arsenal, Paris Saint-Germain, etc., as well as having extremely rich people who've bought the clubs over, they also manage the clubs very, very well financially within the bounds of the financial rules. So Man City, etc., have been managing the team financially on the very, very boundaries of what's legal within terms of the financial rules. So I think they still would, whoever bought over Celtic would still be managing Celtic financially very prudently as well, because these people come from big business, they come from investing, they don't like wasting their money. In a lot of ways, Jack Walker, if we go back to Jack Walker at Blackburn, he spent his whole fortune on Blackburn and in the end didn't actually have very much money left over, much the same as Gretna. They had a multi-millionaire benefactor who spent all his money, and when his money ran out, Gretna completely crashed. So yes. I can't remember, because obviously the family sports group who own Liverpool, I think it's the basketball team in Boston that they're involved in, and they're also involved with the Boston Red Sox baseball team. I can't remember exactly which of the various different, which of the other Boston teams. They definitely are involved with the Boston Red Sox baseball team, and I think they're involved either with the basketball team, which is the Celtics, or the ice hockey team, which is the Bruins, I think. They certainly have their sports group does own several different clubs, and Liverpool and Celtic would be a perfectly reasonable two teams to come together financially. So that is theoretically the family support group could, in theory, take over Celtic. That would lead to a lot of problems, obviously, because if Celtic want to be in the Champions League and Liverpool in the Champions League, that leads to quite a lot of restrictions, which is what caused Crystal Palace problems. Yes, so Rod Stewart would be an example of somebody who could have invested in the club. He says he invests in the club through other ways. Yes. So the Red Sox and are owned by the family support group, a sports group who also own Liverpool. My understanding was that they also had shares or a controlling interest in one of the ice hockey or the basketball team as well, but I might be wrong with that one. So someone was talking about Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart theoretically is a Celtic fan with tons and tons and tons of money. He has been approached to put more and more money into Celtic, but he says he puts his money into Celtic in other ways. That he's a shareholder, but he also puts a lot of money into Celtic charities and the charity foundation as well. I don't know whether that's true or not. Yes. So he certainly seems to have been a very visible Celtic fan over quite a number of years. He certainly seems to turn up in the director's box and in the crowd on a regular basis. He doesn't seem to have actually put very much of his money and finance into Celtic. He hasn't really put. Also, if he wasn't going to be sort of invest in through shares or becoming a member of the board, etc., there are other ways he could be supporting Celtic more and more. He could do a charity concert every season, every year to raise money for Celtic. There are lots of different things that he could be doing to support Celtic more and more. But he seems to be more of a fan in the crowd, in the director's box, and being a visible fan. Yes. Good point. Pat McLaughlin. Rod Stewart was a multi-millionaire back in the times that we went bust and Fergus McCann bailed us out. He could equally have put his money into Celtic. You think about Elton John, another superstar, millionaire, billionaire, pop star. He bought into his club, Watford, took them to financial security, took them to higher levels of football in England. If Elton John can do it, so could have Rod Stewart. Pope Leo XIV, nice to have you back. Entirely correct. To buy out the shares, to get a 50% controlling interest in Celtic would cost an absolute blinking fortune. That's assuming that the people who own a lot of shares in Celtic would want to sell them. If Dermot Desmond is going to get £4 billion for selling his healthcare company, buying his shares isn't really going to be in his financial interest if he wants to keep hold of his shares. Other things about shares, as someone else was pointing out, you can hand your shares down to down in your will and stuff, or hand your shares down to other people in your family. And his sons, I think, are involved also behind the scenes at Celtic as well. So I don't personally see anyone having the financial clout to buy out Dermot Desmond, and certainly every chance that Dermot Desmond could hand on his shares to his son and to his family. And as Pope Leo XIV is also saying there, a lot of Celtic's shareholders and investors are big institutional banks, big American banks, big English investment funds. Buying out the board would be very, very complicated. Probably the best that could be hoped for would be getting the chief financial officer and the chief executive officer sacked, but then the decision to sack them would be coming from the Dermot Desmonds, the Peter Lawwells, the other board members, and also pressure from the shareholders and the other investors in the club as well. Root and branch change of the board, change of the background management structure, I think in terms of financial terms is pie in the sky. Well, we do have Pope Leo XIV as one of our viewers, and so maybe he could put in a word with the Vatican. The Vatican obviously does have a heck of a lot of money, so that would be theoretically an option. Yes, now that's Sligo Boy makes a great point, and apparently that's why Rod Stewart fell in love with the club, was back in the time of Jock Stein. I don't know whether it's a story. I don't know whether it's true. It certainly sounds a very plausible story. I started supporting Celtic just as Jock Stein's time at Celtic was starting to slightly ebb away. He kind of left in the mid-70s. I started supporting in the very early 70s. So he was a very, very impressive man, very, very good speaker, very, very knowledgeable fan, manager of Celtic, massively successful manager of Celtic. What he did to get the Lisbon Lions winning the league, only in the cup in 1967, was pretty incredible, and clearly it's something that since that time we've never well, I think the amount of money in quite a lot of those clubs is a lot of money. We will agree to disagree. Some of the teams who are in the Champions League have the benefit of their season starting so much earlier than ours. Many of the teams that you quote, certainly not, okay, fair enough, not Bodo Glimt. Bodo Glimt are a very, very well-run club. Tremendous ability to bring through the young players. Cyprus is what Pathos did was quite remarkable. What Karabag did was quite remarkable. Remembering also Karabag are not a poor side in that they won their first Champions League match of this season yesterday. They won 3-2 away from home. I think it was against Benfica. I can't remember who it was. I didn't actually follow the results that closely. I just know that Karabag, who are from a tiny, tiny league, they have the benefit of starting their league season well before most other teams do. They came through the qualifiers, same way that Paphos came through the qualifiers, same way that Keirat Almaty had the benefit of that. Copenhagen did have success. Bruges, and so the Belgian league, the Dutch league, a lot more money in it and a lot more prestige in those leagues. But I do agree there are certain teams in that lot who have achieved this Champions League and we haven't. However, a lot of those teams also haven't achieved the Champions League before this season, and the Celtic has been in the Champions League. And last season we got into the deeper stages. So. So I think Celtic is. No, I fully accept everything you're saying. Celtic should be in the Champions League this season. The fact they're not in the Champions League, I don't think you can blame it on necessarily all on the board. In that the players that we put on the pitch for both the Keirat Almaty games should have been way better and good enough to qualify through those games. If you compare the players that we had with the players that Keirat Almaty had, our players should have been way better than them. So the fact that they weren't better than the Keirat Almaty players, partly due to the fact that they were 2/3 of the way through their season, which means that Rodgers, the coaching staff, the physios, etc., didn't have the players at top level fitness, physically, mentally, to go into those matches. And that has been something that Celtic seem to have been poor at doing for a long time, of getting knocked out in the qualifiers by lower leagues and not being prepared as 100% for those early games. And I think blaming the board for everything is unfair. Blaming the board for some of the things is perfectly fair, but there are lots and lots of different parts of Celtic Football Club that aren't functioning at their best, which is all leading to Celtic not qualifying through those games. But I would be surprised to hear any Celtic fan who thinks that the team that Celtic put on the pitch for those two games wasn't good enough to beat Keirat Almaty over two legs. But football's a matter of opinion. It wasn't Michael Nicholson that picked the team. It wasn't Michael Nicholson or Peter Lawwell or Dermot Desmond that picked the team. It wasn't him that decided the tactics. It wasn't them who decided who to play, how to play them. It wasn't him that decided to leave Arnie Engels on the bench, play Benjamin Negan out of position as a central midfielder. All these things are things that Brendan Rodgers decided to do. He decided to take Negrin, who's played as a wide player or as a first striker or second striker. He chose to play him as a central midfielder, not even as an attacking midfielder, but a central midfielder. He chose to play him out in a position he has rarely ever played. It wasn't the board that decided that. It wasn't the chief executive, the CFO that decided it. It was Rodgers that decided to take Negrin out of the positions that he's played well in before and play him in a position he'd rarely played before. So there are many things that haven't gone right in the summer window. Yes, good. Great to have a point in which we agree. I'd say some brilliant opinions, and I agree 100%. But I think it's a very, very complex thing. A lot of the teams that you highlighted, the Bodo Glimts, the Copenhagens, the Union Saint-Gilloise, I think they have done a really good job in terms of making the clubs, that having the academy as being a way of bringing in players. I think they've done a great job in terms of their scouting and recruiting to get players to come and play for them and move them on. The heck of a lot of players who are playing all around Europe in the highest leagues for the best teams who started at those sorts of clubs. So I think Celtic have not had a long-term succession planning. The company I used to work with, my line manager, it was one of the things that he kept on saying was the company that we worked for wasn't very good at succession planning, in that I'd been doing my job for many years at the highest level in that company, but there was nobody being developed to take my place when I chose to semi-retire or retire, as I did do 2 or 3 years ago. And so when I left the company, there was a massive vacuum at the top in that particular part because they hadn't succession planned. And I think Celtic's been terrible at succession planning. Good clubs keep on having players to bring through from their academies. They bring in players from other clubs. They recruit those players. They integrate them into the team far better. Possibly with the transfer window we've just had, maybe we are looking a wee bit to develop players for the future to bring them through. Maybe that's why Callum Osman was signed. Maybe that's why Hayato Inamura was signed. Maybe that's why we've kept hold of Johnny Kenny. Maybe that's why we've signed Engels and Paulo Bernardo. It wasn't so much about this season or last season. It's about the seasons to come. If there is a real succession planning at Celtic, that would be brilliant. Part of the problem we've also had is obviously we had Ronnie Dyer for a couple of seasons. We had Rodgers for 3 seasons. We had Neil Lennon for 2 or 3 seasons. We had Ange Postecoglou for 2 seasons. We've so far had Rodgers for 2 and a bit seasons. We've not had the continuity of a manager bridging the gap between one squad and the next squad and the next squad. It's kind of been 2 or 3 years of that manager, 2 or 3 years of this manager, 2 or 3 years of that manager. There's not been the long-term succession planning, kind of like there was under Ferguson, Wenger, Jurgen Klopp. A lot of what Jurgen Klopp did in terms of developing Borussia Dortmund has been carried on by future managers. What he did at Liverpool has been carried on with Arne Slot now taking over a lot of the great players that Klopp had brought into the club, but also Klopp had produced through the Liverpool Academy. Liverpool's actually got a lot of players who've come through their academy structure into the first team structure. And it's something that Celtic are way behind the rest of Europe and the rest of the world with. Whether that's the manager's fault, whether that's the CEO's fault, whether that's the board's fault, it's probably everybody's fault. But it's certainly something that Celtic have not addressed for 20 plus years. Lauren, I couldn't agree more. Some of the worst minutes of football were those 3 games, those 3 0-0 draws. The strange thing was when it came to the penalty shootout in that Kira Almaty game, I didn't have a lot of confidence in the players winning that penalty shootout, in that so many of the players looked flat and tired and scared and not motivated. And as I said before, not sure who, someone put forward the theory that the Kairat Almaty players were all high-fiving and punching fists and slapping each other in the back and shouting and big huddles and stuff, and Celtic were just quietly standing there drinking their drinking bottles on the side. No one really seemed to be getting anybody fired up. Nobody seemed to be really giving each other confidence, etc., which is a wee bit of a contrast to the Aberdeen semi-final cup penalty shootout win, or the penalty shootout last League Cup final when we beat Rangers, in that a lot of the players looked much more fired up for those penalty shootouts. A lot more firing up of the players, much better. Rodgers and the coaching staff getting the players all fired up for that. Everything was very flat, both legs against Kairat Almaty, and probably, as you say, some of the worst minutes of football I've ever watched. And the Rangers match was even worse, if possible. So, my personal feeling is if Celtic's players play to their best, we will get through this group stage type thing of the Europa League into the knockout stage. I presume you're implying that Kairat Almaty are a pantomime horse. Well, they certainly had a bad result today. My personal feeling is that not beating Kairat Almaty by 2 or 3 goals at Celtic Park was the major bad result. In that Kairat Almaty in their home games previously in Europe have actually had a pretty good record. The last time they were in the Europa League or the Conference League, they went unbeaten in their home games. So I think they actually are a difficult team to beat in Kazakhstan for a variety of reasons. The travel times to Kazakhstan, the temperatures in Kazakhstan, they're playing at altitude in Kazakhstan, the time zone differences are all quite a major factor going to play in Almaty in Kazakhstan. It's going to be interesting to see how they do in their 4 home games. I think in their away games they're probably going to struggle, as they did obviously today against Sporting Lisbon. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, I misinterpreted what your comment was. I'm sorry. Well, my personal feeling is that Celtic will win the league this year. I think even with several injuries, I think Celtic still's got the best squad in Scotland. Every team generally in a season runs into problems in terms of injuries and suspensions. I think Celtic's got enough depth in their squad. I think we've also got some very good young players that we can bring into the team. Colby Donovan obviously is a really good example of, he in essence starts the season as our 3rd choice right back. I thought he had a very good I thought Colby Donovan was one of our better players, more fired up players in the Kairat Almaty game when he got brought on as a substitute later in the game after Ralston's ankle foot injury. I thought he had a really good game against Kilmarnock in what in essence was his proper first team debut, going to play on their plastic pitch on a rainy, windy day, not an at all easy game to play in. Thank you. Thank you for forgiving me. It's one of the difficulties of trying to keep the discussion going, keeping the things flowing, and also trying to keep an eye on the comments. They're happily, and I'm really grateful for this, there are so many comments, and one of the things I particularly wanted by doing these live streams was to give lots and lots of people a chance to make their comments. I have been a participant in the comment section in quite a number of different other people's live streams. And what I've found on those other live streams is it tends to be an awful lot of the mates of the person who is the moderator, the person who runs the channel. Seems to be an awful lot of their mates are the ones who get their comments put up on the screen. So one of my thoughts was to try and encourage lots of different Celtic fans with lots of different Celtic opinions, some of whom, or all of whom so far, who contribute to the channel have got very good ideas, very good at putting forward their ideas. It was part of the idea of doing these live streams was to encourage lots of people to have lots of thoughts and to share them in a very friendly manner. One of the things that's upset me in the last few months is the fact there has been quite a lot of antagonism to other Celtic fans. One of the people that commented earlier on, called Jezebel, apparently has had a lot of grief from fellow Celtic fans, calling them a Rangers apologist, a board apologist, was a happy clapper, etc. I don't think that's at all fair. Everyone's allowed to have their own different opinions, and everybody should have a forum where they can share those opinions in a friendly, polite, respectful way. I'm all for debate. I'm all for other people having opinions. I'm all for other people trying to change my opinions, and over the 2 years I have changed some of my opinions because other people, Clashman Numpty, Lauren, lots and lots of other people have put forward some very, very good ideas. A couple of people who primarily comment on the Celtic women's games. Again, a lot of them have really opened up my eyes to a lot of the stuff going on in the background at the women's team that I'm just not aware of because I don't follow the team as assiduously as they do. Lauren's another great follower of the women's team as well, and the men's team. And a lot of the comments that Lauren's raised in the past have also opened my eyes to a lot of the ins and outs of the women's game. And a lot of the stuff that Pat McLaughlin, etc., has raised, Clashman Numpty has raised, Stephen, Paul McEwen, etc., has raised, is actually really broadening my knowledge of the club because there's lots of different angles, lots of different memories, etc. Yes, what I'm personally expecting is that, given the mentality and the personality of Brendan Rodgers, I think personally he will take the non-qualifying for the Champions League as a bit of a sort of black mark on his record, his career record, and I think he is going to redouble his efforts and really concentrate on managing Celtic for the next 6 months or so till 8 months or so, 8 months to the end of the season. I think he's going to go all out to win the treble, go all out to do as well as possible in the Europa League. I think a lot of the players that Celtic have also got a thing to prove as well because they let the club down, they let the fans down by not qualifying for the Champions League. I think also Sebastian Chiniecki is a breath of fresh air at the club. And I think he could turn into a very, very good player at Celtic. He's also got a personality, which not a lot of the Celtic players have got. I think he could be a very good signing for Celtic on the pitch primarily, but also off the pitch as well. I think a bit like Jota did when Jota came to us on loan and then as a permanent player. I think he also has a lot of personality and a lot of magnetism, and also the ability to play very well on the pitch as well, which could well be very important. So yes, so Stephen, I think certainly winning the Champions League this season would be ambitious. According to the the computer predictions, Celtic's got about a 1% chance of winning the Europa League, but it certainly was saying that Celtic's got a 72% chance predicted of getting through to the knockout stage. I think certainly getting through to the knockout stage is the level that at least that Celtic should be going for. I think Celtic should actually be aiming for last 8, given the relative strengths of all the various different teams in the Europa League. I think top 8 is where Celtic should be aiming for by the end of the competition. Every possibility in the knockout stage of having a good game and then holding on in the away leg. I think Celtic have got the players to go a long way. Whether we win it, I think it's another matter. If we were to win the Europa League, I think it would forgive a lot of metaphorical sins on behalf of the board and the people behind the scenes. Yes, so according to the computer, Celtic's got a 1% chance of winning the Europa League, but a 72% chance of getting as far as the knockout stage. And I think that certainly is the minimum level I think Celtic needs to get in this Europa League is into the knockout stage. Getting into the knockout stage, you've then got home and away. If the Celtic fans are 100% behind the players, and if the players are 100% on their game, Celtic can certainly win several knockout stages and progress further and further. That's going to require the players to do their job. So, I think personally it's now 20 to 1 in the morning. We've been going for 3 hours and 40 minutes. It's probably a time to call it a day, call it a morning, call it an evening, call it whatever, and bring the live stream to an end. Our planning to do a few more Thursday evening 9 o'clock live streams up and until we start playing the Europa League on a Thursday. Our first Europa League's on a Wednesday against next week, so there will be a Thursday live stream next week, and we'll carry on doing Thursday live streams until the first Champions League game, first Europa League game on a Thursday. Whether we then move to doing these live streams after the Celtic game in the Europa League, so maybe starting at 10 o'clock-ish, and then doing a post-match review, post-match discussion. That's certainly one of the things, ones that we can talk about. So what I plan to do is when we do come to the stage where we need to make a plan about when we're going to do live streams, we'll do a wee poll or a wee discussion type thing on the channel, and then people can then also give their own thoughts as to what happens in terms of live streams. I really enjoy doing the live streams. I really enjoy how many people contribute, how many people share their opinions. I really enjoy the camaraderie, the community spirit, all these things. And thank you to all those people who give me positive feedback. It cheers me up no end getting positive feedback, because doing these channels you quite often get quite a lot of negative feedback. And as I said several times, I have absolutely no training. I am just an enthusiastic amateur having a bit of fun. And yes, I do think, as Sligo Boy is suggesting, Clashman Numpty was saying, thank you very much to Sligo Boy for all your contributions. It's been great having you. I say, plan is to keep on doing Thursday evenings in one way or another, so it'll be brilliant if you come back next Thursday. If you can, it'd be great. You've lots and lots of tremendous contributions. Been great fun having you on the channel. Yes, so Clashman Numpty, probably the biggest number of views and contributions would be doing it straight after the Europa League. Possibility that some of the bigger, successful, well-funded Celtic websites, Celtic fan sites might well be doing that as well. So we'll see how that goes. If the Celtic Davis 67 Celtic fan group, viewer group, subscriber group is keen to do them after the game, I'm very happy to do them after the game as well. So we'll explore that and again in a week or two's time. It certainly would, as you're saying, Stephen, would put a bit of a dampener on the live stream if Celtic have a rotten game. I'm not quite sure how I would have coped with doing a live stream after those two Kierat Almaty games. I think it would have been rather a sad, bad-tempered live stream. I think if we'd done a live stream after the Borussia Dortmund game last season, it again would have been a rather sad, angry couple of hours. Saying that, however, if it had been after the Slovan Bratislava 5-1, the Leipzig 3-1, after the 1-1 draw against Bayern Munich, I think it would have been a much more cheerful effect. So, Friday evening, I think roughly the same time, 9 o'clock might well be a good option. Thing obviously is some people on a Friday evening socialise a lot more, go out to the pub, etc. So we'll see how all that plans out. Yeah, so there are a lot of there are a lot of different options, different evenings. As I say, there are quite a lot of well-established, professionally run Celtic fan sites out there. A lot of them have crossed over from being Celtic fan sites into bigger mainstream media type of things. I too would love to live the Celtic dream as well. So. Yes, thank you very much to everyone who's contributed. I say we'll do this again next Thursday. I'll put a wee promotional thing out on the Wednesday afternoon and the Thursday morning and give sort of general topics we might want to discuss. But as always, the discussions always goes whatever I would tend to agree that certainly seems to be, from what I read and what I glean off videos and other live streams, is that you slag off the board and you automatically get really popular with Celtic fans. That's not really the way that I believe. I think they deserve blame, but I think the blame should be shared around lots and lots of people. So. Oh dear. Okay. So I think we'll leave things there. It's quarter to 1 in the morning. We'll say thank you very much to everybody who's contributed. Hopefully some or all of you can come back next Thursday and do the same again. It's been a tremendously enjoyable 3 and 3/4 hours, 4 hours of fun for me. And thank you very much. See you all again next week. And goodbye and hail.